Good evening, everyone. Welcome to American Advocates. This will be episode 93. Shit, I don't even remember. 92, 93, somewhere around there. Anyways, welcome. This is today, May 12th, 2026, coming to you live and wanting to discuss a slightly different topic today. A lot of content centered around the Iran war lately, for good reason, of course. It's pretty much the only topic that matters now, in my opinion, overall, since it's literally affecting the entire world, along with our United States economy and the Trump administration's overall agenda for the people. However, this morning I had the privilege of waking up on time somehow to catch Steven Crowder debating Nick Fuentes after Nick Fuentes wound up going really viral the other week, actually. I just actually briefly mentioned it on this show here when Nick went viral for announcing his strategy in the 2026 midterms to be, of course, voting Democrat. And so it was a strategy that I found fascinating, and it was definitely a topic that's close to my heart, because if you've been tuning in live to my episodes here, then you know for the longest time now on this channel, I've also been advocating for something similar, though I'll admit Nick Fuentes definitely went more edgelord, more extreme with his stance on all of it by advocating that we just flat out vote Democrat. In my hateful, spiteful heart, I related with that message, though I don't know if I could bring myself to do that. On this channel for months now, I've been talking about how I simply will refuse to vote Republican based off of the very poor performance of both Congress, the Senate. Well, I should say, sorry, Congress is the Senate, but the House of Representatives, along with the Senate, along with the Supreme Court for that matter, which normally wouldn't be one of the criterias that I would hold to the standard of the GOP, but they've been disappointing. And in addition to all of that, the Trump administration and Trump himself as a whole. I just won't vote Republican if they're not going to represent me or my interests. And that's been my message on this channel. Nick Fuentes took it a step further by going viral on this clip the other day, saying that Republicans should play the game, essentially, the way that the Zionists play it, as well as the way that many now in the Trump administration have played it. He accurately pointed out that Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin were never Trumpers, and now they find themselves in within earshot of President Donald Trump. Lindsey Graham was kind of the same way. He was a bit of a traitor, yet somehow he has the ear and endorsement of President Donald Trump. And so shamelessly, a lot of our own politicians and representatives who really don't give a flying motherfuck about us, they shamelessly will play both sides of the field. And that's basically, in summary, what Nick was originally advocating for. It went viral. He's received a lot of hate since then. And I just found the whole thing interesting. Steven Crowder eventually invited him on his show and said, well, let's debate it. And I've admittedly haven't been able to consume a lot of Nick Fuentes' content at length because he goes live very late at night. But I've seen a lot of clips, and I have seen some full-length content of him, specifically talking with Alex Jones, Tucker Carlson, and somewhere else. And I don't remember where now. But then today, of course, I got to watch the full thing with Steven Crowder, and I found it to be probably one of the, I wouldn't say most important debates, but one of the most beneficial debates that I've seen as somebody who actually sits in between the age ranges of both Nick Fuentes and Steven Crowder. Steven Crowder being an older millennial. I'm closer to the zillennial line, being in my early 30s, but I am definitely a millennial, and then by default I'm a little bit older than Nick Fuentes, who I looked up and found out is 28 years old, I guess. And so I'm in the middle, and I related with both of them in various different ways, but I definitely sided actually with one way more than I did the other. And that's what I'm going to break down for the major story of today's episode, rather than just going over 2 hours of Iran war updates like I've been doing for weeks now, which, like I said, obviously has been vital. It's been so important to talk about the Iran war, and I'm still going to talk about it on tonight's episode, but only at the tail end this time. I want to talk about Pete Hegseth and make a prediction centered around him tonight, and give a brief update as some new CIA intelligence has apparently been leaked or put out there. I think James O'Keefe may have been responsible for that, but it's bad news. Surprise, surprise. And so we are going to go over that still, and I'm going to finish tonight's episode with an Iran war update and a Pete Hegseth prediction to make sure that as typically I do here, I ruin your entire evening and leave you going to bed with the pit in your stomach feeling of the fact that the world is going to fucking end. Okay. So, but first, we'll before we get into any of that, before we start with Fuentes versus Crowder on the topic of voting Democrat or not to spite the Republicans, be sure to like the stream if you haven't already. Just double tap those phone screens. Subscribe to American Advocates if you haven't already. And we'll stop everything to acknowledge the $2 super chat tariff from Howard Clegg, our resident boomer and military veteran. Who sadly predicted what I've known in my gut is likely to be true, that we will definitely be going back to war with Iran soon. And I then predicted last night it wouldn't be before Trump meets with Xi, and it does appear to be that way. I don't see any breaking news today of any sort of escalation in the Middle East, and Trump is set to meet with Xi for Wednesday, which will be tomorrow now, right? So. Yeah, more likely perhaps this weekend, I guess, is what will happen. But thank you for the $2 super chat tariff, Howard. I appreciate you as always, man. My moderator lifeguard says Fuentes has a win-win here. He may actually feel that way, but more than that, he can show the true Democrat mind. They can hate then love in 1 second. Well, maybe. Yeah, that's for sure. The Democrats are never going to really love Fuentes, though, is really how that goes. They're never going to really love any of us. His strategy isn't even really so much being about that. It's more about using them as a tool, which I actually do understand. And that's what I'm going to start to break down right now. And of course, I'm not going to put, their debate wound up going for like 2 hours. And in the interest of being a somewhat good faith creator myself, I'm not going to just sit here for 2 hours playing the entirety of the debate. You'll have to go check out, and you should go check it out on Steven Crowder's YouTube channel or Rumble. Because I'll only play about a dozen or so clips of it, but there's so much that they covered, and I just won't have time really to get through it. So if it does intrigue you while you're listening to some of the clips, I definitely will encourage you guys to check that out. I'll even probably put a link to it in the chat towards the end of that segment. Scoon2117 says, "Oh damn, this guy with the beard is surely the yeah. No, I am not the next Andrew Wilson. He is a phenomenal debater." And what do they call that? A logician, one who studies logic. I do admire Andrew Wilson, even though I actually have not always agreed with him as of late. Last year I certainly did. This year, obviously, I think he's doubling a little bit too much down on Trump. But he's so good at debating that he wins arguments despite Trump's failures, and that's how you know he's a good debater. Anyways, let's get into this. So, as I stated, Fuentes went, appreciate your mods, Spartacus. Absolutely. Shout out to Spartacus and Lifeguard for the mod work as always. And like I said, guys, please like the stream if you haven't already. It really does help the show do well in YouTube's algorithm. This is going to be a battle tonight discussing this kind of a topic, I think. It's going to be a fight against the algorithm, which will want to suppress this content, I think. Unlike when I'm criticizing Trump about the Iran war, the algorithm clearly loves my content. It's not probably going to be a fan of it tonight. So like the show, like it right now. It's literally fucking free for you cheap-ass Goyim scum, you sons of bitches who are so fucking lazy that you probably don't even have the energy to move your fat fucking thumbs over the phone screen to double tap it, which would no doubt be the most exercise you've probably gotten all day. And so really it's a win-win. You like the show, and it gives you the little exercise that you need so desperately in your life. And then on top of it, it helps me out too. So let's get into this. Steven Crowder has Nick Fuentes on his show and essentially starts off the show by allowing Nick to explain his reason why the strategy of, rather than perhaps not voting for a few Republicans who are rhino traitor scum, instead voting for Democrats and going the scorched earth direction instead. We'll play that clip right here.
Okay, so flesh out the plan. I disagree. Vote Democrat in 2026. Why? And then walk me through the plan.
So, in 2024, I didn't vote Republican. I recused myself. I just told people not to vote. Everybody thinks I voted for Kamala, but I didn't. I just told people to withhold their vote. But in 2026, what really did it for me was the war in Iran. I think that, for me, that was the red line. We were promised no new wars. We got a war in Iran. And I really believe that if you vote for Republicans after that, it's almost like you'll tolerate anything, because that's such an explicit betrayal and on a very serious matter. And then what's more, to maybe get into the positive reason for voting Democrat as opposed to withholding your vote or not voting Republican.
before he gets into the positive reason too, I just want to pause it and say I completely agree. That was actually for me as well the turning point here on this channel. When we decided to go to war with Iran, that was like the final nail in the coffin for me when it comes to this Republican Party. And like I said here on this channel, I actually think, based off of what I heard today, and we're going to play several clips, like I said, based off what I've heard from Nick Fuentes today, I do believe that I am just infinitely more of a hateful and spiteful person with a much more black heart, despite being a Protestant Christian. And so, as a result of that, my longing is just to watch the Republican Party suffer. And while I certainly do understand the strategy that Nick Fuentes is putting forth here, and we're going to show clips, I'm going to play clips of that and break them down and react to them. Me inherently, I just despise weakness. And so first and foremost, strategy aside, the Republicans don't really deserve to win. And you can argue all you want in the chat about how the raw truth is, the Democrats will be infinitely worse. My own moderator has argued with me and brought up the point that this channel will cease to exist if Democrats maintain or regain the presidency in 2028. But the reality for me is, you know what? I get paid on this channel, and I love doing this right now. It's probably one of the highlights of every evening for my life right now, though I own businesses on the side that I believe in wholeheartedly, of course, for the long-term future of my life. I like doing this. And the truth is, though, yes, if Democrats regain the presidency in 2028, as critical as I've been of Trump in this war, I'll be infinitely more critical of Democrats when they're in office, and I'll be pointing out everything they're doing wrong, which does mean that they won't just demonetize this channel like has already happened thus far, but they will remove this channel entirely, and they'll claim that it's either misinformation or something to the effect. And so I am aware of that, but the bottom line is it's all going. And this is what people really don't understand. It's all going. You're going to lose all of it anyway, especially if we wind up in some sort of a circumstance where it's the same old neocon conservatives running against liberal progressives. Eventually, the Republicans will lower the morale of the voters so low that they'll lose the support over time and the Democrats will win anyway. And so really, what you'll see over the course of this debate is it is Steven Crowder arguing to toe the party line and holding out in hopes for something better or for a slow and steady, makeover of the GOP. Whereas Nick Fuentes is pointing out this idea that, what's going to happen is the GOP is lowering the morale of all the youthful voters, myself included, that it really doesn't matter, that the loss will be coming regardless. And so we may as well throw a Hail Mary right now and try to weaponize that loss in our favor. And it'll be up to you ultimately to decide which one is the correct strategy to pick as conservatives here. But that's really what's been taking place on this show. And for me personally, I don't care. Fuck all of it. That's my actual standpoint. Like I am not detached from the reality of the fact that Democrats will inevitably regain power if this disgusting and corrupt Israel worshiping GOP continues to have control and radical and quick reform doesn't occur. Democrats will regain control anyway. It'll all be going. Whether or not you vote Republican in 2026 or 2028, it's all going. They're going to take all of it away. And the fact of the matter is, even if neocons win in 2028, that isn't better enough to the point of where it's not all going either way. We're living through the example right now. I'm going to rant right now. We're living through the example right now of what it gets you to vote Republican in a way that allows the entire GOP to control everything. They control everything. And what do we have for it? Inflation is up again today to 3.8% because this disgusting GOP party worships fucking Israel and the bullshit ass Zionist agenda, and they send all of our money overseas to support the country and another Middle East war. We're right back in the position we didn't want to be in, and it's all going. And you're going to hear great arguments from both sides, but especially, in my opinion, from Nick Fuentes, on how much of a failure this administration has been, and therefore, in my opinion, points to the reason of why they don't deserve our support. And so that's my first thought right there, but I'm going to continue playing the clip here.
I think that when you look at the House of Representatives in particular, and I say this on my show.
Hang on, let me turn down the speed a little bit here. I listened to this very fast, but I'm aware that's probably way too fast for most people. They do not talk this fast, I promise. I had it at 1.85 speed. Let me turn that down quite a bit.
They exercise oversight powers under the Constitution. And so they can depose, they can compel the release of documents, they can subpoena, form subcommittees. And I really believe that they, set against the Republicans, will actually work to slow down the administration. And it's not just that the administration is not doing things, they're doing things that are bad. They did try to bury the Epstein files. And if it wasn't for the Democrats and a handful of Republicans, they would have never seen the light of day. And then you have the War Powers Resolution in the Senate, which got shut down basically along party lines, with one exception, which was John Fetterman. And so, and then you have a group of Democrats, this is just last week, they put out a letter to the White House asking to disclose Israel's nuclear program. So I would like to see actually
So
Democrats...
can you repeat that last part just for people who maybe missed it? There was a lot of rapid fire, disclosing the nuclear program.
Yeah, there was a group of 20 House Democrats. They signed a letter to the White House basically asking the White House to acknowledge that Israel has a nuclear arsenal.
I actually covered this right here on this show as well when it comes to the Democrats. I thought there was 40 of them. I misread the report. Apparently there were 20. But I did cover that story here on this channel as well. It's a little known story, but it is true. And it actually is a great example of how there are silver linings to these decisions that are being made here when it comes to the Democrats taking back some power. And this is very uncomfortable for a lot of conservatives and toe the party line type voters to acknowledge. But he's absolutely right. And it's been the same stuff I've been talking about on this channel as well, which is the Epstein files. It's a very clear in-your-face example of actual administration interference. Trump himself did everything he could in correlation with Speaker Mike Johnson. If you remember correctly, back during last summer, Speaker Mike Johnson actually went on recess early in the summer for Congress, for the House of Representatives, to avoid the final vote on establishing the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And after it was inevitably represented to them and then voted on almost unanimously, after Thomas Massey, a Republican, and Ro Khanna, a Democrat, created a bipartisan alliance to get it passed, it was voted on almost unanimously with one politician voting against the legislation. Speaker Mike Johnson then went public and said this is a catastrophe. He literally said it's a disaster and that it's bad news because it could reshape our entire political system as we know it and destroy it, which is actually good news to the average everyday American who doesn't like to think about the idea of so many of our politicians being blackmailed the way that they almost certainly were being blackmailed while Epstein Island was an actual thing. But nevertheless, that is a real in-your-face example of just how disgusting the Republican Party is. And I myself, as a social and fiscal conservative, would be remiss to not acknowledge that as well. And I have acknowledged that on this channel. Back last year, before I was going live, I only started going live the past couple of months, the past 3 months. And I tried all last year to do long form videos. Long story short, the YouTube algorithm wasn't really helping out there. It doesn't really like long form videos anymore. But I put out videos as it was happening. And that was really my first major form of criticism against Trump. It started last year now, last May, during the disastrous cabinet meeting. It became very clear that the Trump administration had did a complete 180-degree turn on the Epstein files and decided for some reason, which we still don't know because we are still missing half of them, if not more than half really, decided for some reason that those files cannot see the light of day. And I think many people have speculated, probably accurately so, that many top-name politicians, elites, and Israeli officials, probably most importantly, are in those files, and that's why Trump cannot release them. Now, many other people think Trump's name himself is in those files in an incriminating way. I've long predicted on this channel that wouldn't be the case, and that Trump would personally not be implicated in them. I actually still stand by that. And the reason why is when you understand what was at play there with Epstein Island and what was going on, then you understand that there are things more powerful than Trump that would be persuading him and very likely borderline forcing him to withhold the other half of the Epstein files. It wouldn't be about his name being implicated in them or not. Not to mention, of course, on his campaign trail, he did say he would release them. And he would have never said that if he even thought there was a 1% chance his name would appear in the files in any incriminating way. You can disagree with that all you want. You're free to, but that's always been my prediction. It's not been Trump himself who he has to protect. It's actually been a lot of other big names and probably foreign country politicians and officials who are in those files who Trump feels obligated to protect. But regardless of what the truth is behind all of it, it is a real fact that those Epstein files were withheld from us. In addition to the fact that, like he said, the Democrats have formed a committee now, and they're demanding that the President Trump address the Israel nuclear situation, which we all know, well, I'm assuming we know the actual story behind that, and how it was JFK originally who had tried to go against the grain on that and knew Israel was trying to pull the wool over our eyes on their nuclear program in the 60s. And he was the one trying to demand inspections at Dimona, etc. And the prime minister of Israel at the time wound up, I believe, resigning. But then, obviously, down the line, about 5 months later, after JFK had basically said, I'm going to insist on inspections, and I know something's not right, because you're not supposed to be pushing for nuclear development, Israel. 5 months later, he goes for his convertible ride, and we all know how that ends. And then his successor, LBJ, quietly just drops the matter altogether. And one thing leads to another. Israel steals the plans and steals the materials from various different countries, assembles it, creates their nukes. And we know now for a fact they have their Samson option written into their government policy. There was an incident even where one of the Israeli prime ministers or officials wheeled the nuclear weapons out into the deserts for satellites to pick up as a passive aggressive threat in regards to political inaction. I believe that was under I think that was Carter. I think that was under Jimmy Carter where they did that. So they've flaunted it pretty much. They've said the quiet part almost out loud without saying, yeah, we have nukes. Everything else that they have done, though, basically is them acknowledging they have nukes. It's like the world's least best kept secret that Israel has nukes. And everyone just pretends either that they don't or that it's not a big deal and it's not worth inquiring about. And so the Democrats, it should be the Republicans. If Republicans are the good guys that they claim that they are, and I wish I could believe that as a conservative, like I said, it should be them that are holding Israel's feet to the fire on this, but they never did. And now it's the Democrats that are doing that. And so that's another good point, unfortunately, that you really just can't argue against. And it is one of those rare W's for the Democrat Party that would provide a silver lining. In addition to his main point, which is this Trump administration, and I've said this on this channel as well, this Trump administration is off the rails with this Iran war. It's the least popular modern war in modern American history. It's more unpopular than Iraq 2003, and it's also more unpopular than Vietnam. And so halting this Trump administration at this point, and I'm going to play a clip of President Trump today, mind you, when it comes to how he views us and our current economic situation, because there's some breaking news on that will really fucking piss you off. But halting this administration at this point is honestly probably for the best. So I don't really even disagree with any of that either, but I'm going to keep playing it a little bit here. Where did I leave off? Yeah, I'm going to play the next 35 seconds or so here. Be sure to like the stream, by the way, if you haven't already. It's free to do, and it really does help the show perform better in YouTube's algorithm, which I'm definitely going to be at war with tonight. Nick Fuentes is a no-no word on YouTube. He stands for too much truth, I think, and he stands for too many radical ideas. YouTube just hates it, but I don't really give a flying shit. We're going to cover this anyway.
Because they believe, and I think it's correct, that the lack of disclosure about that creates a risk of miscalculation or escalation. We don't know where Israel's red line is when they would use a nuke. So these are just like a few examples where I think that it's actually a good thing for Democrats to have a divided government with Republicans and slow down and challenge some of the things that are going on, because I think they're not good. And then if you will, do you want to stop there and then get on to the other part, or do you want me to finish?
Well, no, I think so. So let's take all that, let's take it in totality.
And here's the sad reality again. It's actually a good thing, he says, that the Democrats will split the government and take some of the power back. It's a shame that that has to be said, because the real goal should always be, as conservatives, to have what we have now, which is, again, like I said just a few moments ago, we have all the branches of government under our control right now, literally all of it. We have Senate, we have the House, we have the courts, the major courts, the Supreme Courts, and we have the executive. And again, where are gas prices headed? Only up. Where's inflation heading? Up. It's literally up. Where's our cost of living going? Into the toilet as prices rise. This is now what we're being told is the golden age, by the way. Trump just said that 2 days ago, at a White House lawn festival. We're in the golden age. We are in the golden age. Americans thank me all the time, and they say, "Thank you, Mr. President." Wow. Yeah, where's that at, Mr. President? Where the fuck is that golden age at? And the even funnier part, by the way, it's the golden age for the rich, says James Lacoste. Yes, it is. And even funnier is Even funnier about this is, of course, shit, I lost my train of thought because fucking lifeguard said that Fuentes sped up sounds like Ben Shapiro, and that's true actually. Um, the even funnier part, not only is it not a golden age, but it's literally like getting worse than Biden's economy. And so, you know what? This is the argument of why it should just be Democrats, and it's really important to note it's Democrats for the midterms is the strategy. Now, Nick Fuentes expands on his point here. That's what I'm going to go to next. And of course, I'm going to be playing Steven Crowder's responses because he does give a good argument back, in my opinion. But the next main good one here, I'm going to go to right now. Yeah, right here. So we'll play this. He expands on this point a little bit more.
In other words, you're saying this will lead us to a consistent or more representative victory, 2028. What's the roster? Where are the funds? What's the ground game, right? Because it's a big risk, handing the country over to the left. We know what they want to do.
Well, and see, this is where it gets interesting, and this is where we might disagree on some things. So the way that I see it, 2028 is really what it's all about. I really believe that this administration is just cooked. Like, I don't think there's going to be a course correction. I have no faith in this administration. I think Trump is old. The people around him are very bad. And so I think the real question is, and this is a huge question, who will be Trump's successor? Because that person is going to define the direction of the party. And I really believe there should be a very competitive primary for the presidential race in 28. And what they're trying to do is consolidate support around either Vance or Rubio. As I'm sure you know, behind the scenes, there's a very big fight going on between donors and between party personnel. Are they going to get behind Rubio, which he seems to have the backing of the neocons and Mark Levin and AIPAC and Miriam Adelson? Or are they going to get behind Vance, who has the support of Little Tech, Palantir Tucker, and he's going to clearly run in the more America First lane.
Yeah, and this, you don't even need to know the behind the scenes stories to understand just how real this is. Without a doubt, Marco Rubio does have the backings of all the neocons and the public statements being made from Mark Levin, who has continually sung the praises of Marco Rubio and his leadership. And then in addition to it, of course, we have Peter Thiel, who is backing J.D. Vance. He's also backing people, he's associated with people like Tucker Carlson, and he backs people like Vivek Ramaswamy, who just won his primary in Ohio, who's an Indian scumbag who comes here and tells us that Americans are lazy and we like sports too much and we're fucking stupid and we sleep when we should be working and we party during our college years, et cetera, and that's all the reasons why we deserve to be replaced by fellow Indians of his. Now, this is a Republican, mind you, and there are cucked enough Republican toe-the-line party people out there that will vote. They will literally chop their own cock off, not to go transgender, but it's the only real way that's acceptable at this point to continue voting for a party that clearly doesn't give a shit about you as a white man. And so there are Republicans, sadly, that will vote for Vivek Ramaswamy, who loves H-1B visas and despises Americans. And that should be clear to anybody who's listened to him. But that's what's going on, and that's completely correct. It really is being thrown in our faces at this point and presented to us that either you choose Vance. If you're a conservative, either you're going to choose Vance or Rubio in the primaries, and that's what's going to go up against probably like Gavin Newsom with an AOC vice president or something horrendous. And that's the truth. And essentially the argument here, this is the strategy that people are missing. And I think he expands on this, so I don't mean to say it for him, but the strategy really here is getting Democrats in the midterms, a blue wave, which I think is coming regardless, by the way. I understand he's saying the strategy, and he went viral for it and got a lot of clicks for saying that he's a conservative who's going to vote Democrat because the Republicans don't deserve it and the Democrats can halt this administration. But I think the blue wave's coming anyway, because the bottom line is, like I said, the economy's doing terrible under Trump now, and there's no turning it around in time for midterms. The rest of 2026 is shot, and the first half of 2027 is very likely as well, all because of this Iran war, which is being done at the behest of Israel, not at the request of the American people, who, of course, with this war, we find it so unfavorable that we actually found Vietnam more popular and or the Iraq 03 war. This war now is only popular with anywhere between 21 to 33% of Americans, depending on the poll. And so all that is to say, the strategy is not just to halt this Trump administration with a blue House of Congress that will leverage some of their power then and oversight power, but also the strategy is to ensure that this Republican Party continues to spiral downhill, which it probably will anyway. You know, at least in Trump 1, in the Trump first term, we got a good year and a half out of Trump with certain things before it all went to shit in the latter half of his first term. This time around, Trump gave us all of 4.5 months of good shit, most of which won't last if Democrats take over anyway. And then it all went downhill, starting with the Epstein files in May, the no deep state arrest by the time August hit, and everything else that started transpiring last year, and then especially this year with the Iran war. And so really, it's to finish driving a knife in the heart of this disgusting, corrupt GOP and ruin the reputation of everybody involved in this Trump administration, which I agree with, because if you do your homework on these people, none of them are deserving of our votes anyway. These are all scumbags. We have Susie Wiles, we have Pete Hegseth, who actually strikes me, as I've said before, as a genuine guy, but he doesn't seem all that bright when it comes to strategy. I admire his loyalty to the president thus far, but he's also just an idiot. He certainly doesn't deserve any sort of name on a ticket. Marco Rubio's a neocon and always has been. And what a sad reality it would be for the Republican Party to find ourselves now, what would it be, 10, 11, 12 years later, from a stage where we saw Trump shitting on Little Marco. Little Marco is owned by the Jewish donor lobby, and that's all that he's about. He's a neocon, Little Marco. Now, 12 years later, you expect us to vote for that fucking scumbag neocon little bitch? That's what we get after 12 years of Trump. We get just neocon Little Marco as our candidate. Are you fucking kidding me? And so the whole point is ruin it, like kill it, because from those ashes potentially could rise up other good candidates. And we don't really know what those names will be, which is one of the main arguments from Steven Crowder here. And I believe that's his first objection. So I'm going to play that next part right now because it is, to his credit, somewhat of a good objection. Let me skip forward to that.
And to me, that's really the big picture.
Okay, so here's my primary problem, what you just said. And it's a keyword maybe. So my first question is, the roster? You said, yeah, competitive primary, I agree. I hear who you don't want. The roster, the funds, the ground game. Maybe, right? Because you've tried this before. It's failed. The losses are real with the Democrats that we faced. I would argue, I think it'd be tough to argue against, worst 3 years in modern American history. The wins, the potential wins that you're describing are imaginary with no concretes. And I know that you talked about this with Dan Bilzerian, so I'm not trying to sandbag you here, but if I'm going, okay, there's a risk. It's a political play. Well, I won't be able to take part, along with many conservative Republicans, because I cannot vote Democrat. Doesn't mean I'll vote for Republicans all across the board. Can't vote Democrat. But the roster, the funds, the ground game. You know, the things that you need to win elections in 2028 through the major risk of handing the country over to Democrats when we know that means open borders, packing the courts, turning them into citizens, DEI back in the administration, H-1B skyrocketing again, all of that. Huge risk, concretes, so we see the payoff.
So he's asking for a very reasonable request. And the reason why the request is so reasonable is because most people are gutless cowards. They have no hope within them as they're too afraid. They are too afraid with their own egos to place faith and hope into any sort of mission, which is why most people are plainly and objectively average and normal, if not below average or normal. They have no ability to hope for anything or to even conceive of the notion that something better could come. They would prefer to think the worst so that way they don't ultimately feel let down. It's an ego thing, and it's a self-sabotaging human mechanism that most people are guilty of. However, that being said, most people are the voters. And so while you may have idealists like Nick Fuentes, who is coming up with some sort of a actual viable strategy here on what to do about not 2026, but rather 2028, when it comes to finally ridding ourselves of these disgusting neocon conservatives, the bottom line is, at the end of the day, you need to be able to present somebody with an actual option when it comes to who is going to rise up that you should place your faith in. It's not an unreasonable request. And so that was Steven Crowder's first objective, and it is fair for him to make because you can. The fact of the matter is really, and when Nick Fuentes went viral on this channel, or on X, and I covered that on this channel and briefly acknowledged it and said, Nick's telling people to vote Democrat, and in my hateful, spiteful heart, I can understand why he would say that, and I myself have been tempted to do so in the past. I did say that the number one problem with his strategy would be not being able to identify which leader will rise up in order for us to be able to point to and say, well, this is why you do this in 2026, because we got to destroy Marco Rubio, the neocon, and J.D. Vance, the Peter Thiel-backed candidate, who will usher in a AI surveillance state courtesy of Palantir, because he will. Who then do you vote for instead? And when the answer is, well, we don't know yet, that's a problem for people, and it's actually an understandable one. So that was Steven Crowder's first objection, and Nick acknowledges that objection and actually goes on to counter it in a pretty decent way as well. So I'm going to play that right now.
See, and this is where you might disagree, because I think that's maybe the best argument against it, and you're 100% right. It is an extremely risky play, and I don't underestimate that risk at all, and I don't want to understate it. But here's my reframe. Here's kind of like my game theory reframe of it, is I really believe that this country has serious problems with the debt, with the border. They want a $1.5 trillion budget for the military alone. The Republicans do. We got this war in the Middle East. I really believe that without a radical intervention, like a radically different approach, whether we get a Democrat or lesser of two evils Republican, like a continuity with what we have under Trump, I think that's a no-win proposition. Like, if it's Gavin Newsom, J.D. Vance, or Marco Rubio, if those are our options, and let's say everybody else in the Democratic field, I don't see any of those candidates solving it, fixing it. To me, it's really just a question of how fast or how slow it's all going to come crumbling down. And so that's the only reason why I say, if we degrade the two people in this administration, it's sort of like we know what we're going to get with them, and we know it's not going to be radical enough. At least if we tear them down, it's a huge maybe, but then there's an opening that something radical may appear. And I've got some people in mind. I wouldn't say them, of course, because you know that game about who's going to run and who's going to throw their hat in the ring, and then my endorsement might hurt that person if they're characterized as the Groyper.
No, I don't.
So he says, of course, I have somebody in mind, but I can't say who because I'm too controversial to figure myself, and I'll tarnish his reputation before they can really even get it off the ground, which is fair to say. I think it's fair to say. Now, Crowder winds up objecting to that too, and I'm going to play that in a second. But the fact of the matter is, this is essentially the strategy as I just summarized it. Again, voting Democrat in the midterms to oust the Republicans, put a halt on the Trump administration, finish shattering the reputation of this vile and betrayal of an administration, which is what this is. That's certainly how I feel about it as a younger millennial voter who voted for Trump in 2024 and voted conservative. You finish this administration off to ensure that none of them can take the position of Republican primary candidate in 2028. We don't want any of these people in this administration to be president in 2028. They're all an abomination and unworthy of that title. But beyond that, he basically then goes on to say as well that, you know, the strategy basically is you not only do all of that, but then in addition to that, you make the way for the candidate that you want to come up. And he says, well, I have somebody in mind, but I can't say who. And he acknowledges that that's a good argument, and it's a good spot where people get hung up on. If they don't know who, then they can't follow the plan. Now, Steven Crowder basically winds up going on to say, I think you can say who it is. I think it wouldn't hurt them at this point in time. And I'll play that real quick as well, his objection here. They go through the whole scenario, basically, of this.
I don't think so.
Or something.
I don't think so. I mean, we have examples of that right here. I mean, Ken Paxton, who you may or may not like, but like Brandon Herrera, who was on the show, you know, he won his primary. We had him on the show. I knew him through the gun tube community, and he directly went up against AIPAC. They put out a hit on him, figuratively, to be clear to people watching. He fought them, and he's going to win. He's going to win his seat. He then won the primary. So, no, you could have an effect. I actually think it's a requirement, frankly, considering the risk.
Now, real quick, I actually want to pause this because coming up, we'll see more of an argument from Steven Crowder in regards to how he doesn't think the strategy can work because he says essentially you can't teach the Republicans a lesson they don't want to learn, and they're never going to change, essentially, is what I've heard from a lot of people. And it seems to be similar to the kind of argument that Steven Crowder is making here, where it's like, well, you don't teach the Republicans a lesson by voting Democrat. You just vote your own doom in, essentially, which you vote in faster. The argument in opposition to that from Nick Fuentes is, well, the doom is coming either way. It's just the Republicans make sure we get there a little bit slower, which I actually personally agree with at this point. But in addition to that, he then says, well, all you get is you get Democrats winning, and then down the line, you get the donors that are paranoid about propping up more of a far-right candidate, and instead then they go for the softball moderate. We'll play that clip later on this channel. And it seems at face value like it's a good argument. And it seems like at face value, Steven Crowder's argument of, well, there won't be any dark horse candidates. Well, all you're going to get are the donor classes, the donors propping up a moderate Republican that's more unacceptable than the last one. But he just goes on to say right here and defeat his own argument before even making it. He goes on to point out Brandon Herrera, somebody who turned down AIPAC donor money and is now going on to win. He's going on to win where he's running. Right? And we have other examples of dark horse candidates on both sides of the aisle, technically, who I've also gone on to point out several times on this channel. It doesn't just end with Brandon Herrera. Now, they mentioned Dan Bilzerian as well at the beginning of this interview. I don't really know if he's going to be a very qualified candidate, but he's another example of a dark horse candidate rising up in his county. It's actually technically not even his county, which is another problem, but it's in Florida. And he's running up against Randy Fine, the Jew who's pushing anti-Semitism censorship laws in his state, in Florida, alongside actually tragically being signed by Ron DeSantis. And Dan Bilzerian is a dark horse candidate who's risen up and is gaining some form of traction. He'll probably not win, but he is gaining traction. We have another example. This is not one Republicans like to acknowledge, but it is also the truth. Zohran Mamdani, who ran as mayor of New York City, was the odd man out, a Muslim of some sort. He was eating rice with his hands, vowed to tax the rich more, et cetera, et cetera. And they said, there's no way this guy wins. He's a socialist, absolutely no shot. He's a complete dark horse candidate. He'll never win. It's going to come down between Cuomo and that other fucking guy. Don't even remember his name now. It's not worth memorizing. Skajiwa or something like that. I don't even know. It wasn't an election I got to vote in, obviously. So they said it was going to come down between those two, and Zohran was some dark horse candidate who would just take away votes from the party that we wanted to win, or a candidate that we would have preferred to win, since they were all shit anyway, because it's, New York up there is one of the most liberal states ever. But what winds up happening? All broken down inside of one question. During the primary for the mayor of New York City, they're all asked, "What will you do upon winning the mayoral race for New York City? What will be one of the first things you do as mayor of New York City?" Well, several of these bought and paid for absolute Israel worshiping shills said that they would book a trip to fucking Israel. And when it got to Zohran Mamdani and he was asked, "Would you do that too?" He said, "No, I'm going to be mayor of New York. So my first course of action is going to be to start solving the problems of New York City residents." Now, of course, he's a moron. He's going to raise property taxes, but he believes probably what he's doing is correct, and therefore his answer was genuine. And as the dark horse candidate, he goes on to win the election in outstanding fashion, garnering more and more support and votes from the youth. And this is the generation gap I've talked about for many, many months now, going on probably a full year at this point on this channel. Pretty much within a few months of starting this channel, I've begun to acknowledge the generational gap. A lot of boomers that are just raised as absolute psyop pussies who know nothing about resistance or courage or any of that, can't contemplate the idea of voting for a dark horse. They think it's impossible. They think, well, this is the way it is, and you're going to vote for the big name, otherwise we'll lose. And the youth don't accept that anymore. And Zohran Mamdani is a living example of that success-wise. Brandon Herrera, another living example now, going on to very likely win, as Crowder acknowledged, who refused AIPAC funding. We also have James Fishback running for governor of Florida. Are his chances phenomenal that he's going to win? No, but he's been making massive waves, refuses all AIPAC donor money, and draws bigger and bigger crowds, especially as a gubernatorial candidate. He's drawing these crowds at these restaurants, lines out the door, people showing up to events. He's garnering more and more attention. And so the hunger for dark horse candidates is growing, especially with the youth. And why this matters is because the generational gap is upon us. We're living in it now, and boomers are finally fucking dying off. Sorry, Howard Clegg, our cool resident boomer. We love you, and we hope that you live for another 30 years. We need more boomers like him. We have some cool resident boomers here, but for the most part, the boomers are finally dying, and that towing the party line notion is going right out the door with them, which is why we see more registered independents than ever. We see the youth leaving the Republican Party, but not to go to the left, not with many of the Gen Z men especially. They're just leaving the Republican Party as it currently stands because they know it doesn't suit them. And so the hunger for dark horse candidates is there, and Steven Crowder will go on later, will play it to basically say, well, it's not really possible. But he just defeated that argument right now before he even made it by acknowledging Brandon Herrera. And I think they go on to acknowledge some of the other names I just mentioned as well. And so the argument can be made, and it is being demonstrated to us right now that at least it's in the process of taking shape. And I wanted to point that out. Now, where did I leave off here? 40? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll continue playing this, though, because it continues to get a little more interesting.
If we both acknowledge it, the risk is you say something radical could happen. With the answer you're giving me now, something radical, it's the radical that we experienced from 2020 through 2024. So the radical upside, you do got to give a name, you do have to give some finances and a ground game for us to take that risk. Because I don't think, and I'll make the case here, I don't think there's an equivalency. If you look at the actual record, Nick, when Democrats controlled the Senate, gave us open borders, record inflation, right, at 9.1%, trillions in new spending. They, of course, stopped deportations. They stopped building the wall. They put DEI, and they had a Department of Misinformation. Trump 2.0 has put us for the time in net negative immigration, record deportations, over $1 trillion in cuts. Not to mention doing away with DEI in the administration, some huge Supreme Court wins that actually paved the way going forward. I mean, H-1Bs are a really big thing, I know, because you ran billboards on them. They are not the same. These are actually, I would say, and I think you'd be hard-pressed to argue against whether they're enough. They are the single biggest rightward shifts domestically that we have seen in modern American history, and that includes Reagan, Nixon, anyone else. So the risk is what we lived through. That's guaranteed to happen unless we have concrete.
And so that's actually not a terrible argument. And for as much as I criticize President Donald Trump right here on this channel in regards to this war and in regards to how he's handling the economy, and ironically the statement he made today, which I'm going to get to later on this episode when I do give a brief update on the Iran war to end things off, there are some accomplishments that have been made here. And I've acknowledged those on this channel, especially last year when I was still more in favor of what Trump was doing as opposed to this year where he's completely betrayed the MAGA party as it stands, as well as all of his conservative and especially independent voters. And there are some good things that have come about here. The right to choose that he just signed with Joe Rogan standing behind him is a very minor but good example of this. There have been a few small but great changes made. Negative net migration to some degree is happening, and I stand by that wholly. I want to see every single illegal immigrant deported out of this country, and Trump has gone forward with that somewhat. But you know, if you're a longtime viewer on this channel, that the deportations have pretty much ended as we know it, and I've broke down on this channel why that's true, citing every reason why, from Greg Bovino being essentially fired and pulled out of Minnesota to the narrative switch from mass deportations from Susie Wiles, the manager, within the White House, basically instructing everybody in the Trump administration to stop saying the term mass deportation and instead divert to the term worst of the worst, which I broke down last year. I reported on this and I said, how stupid is this? Because, you know, they're citing the midterm pressure as the reason why, but the immigration is perhaps the biggest issue plaguing us domestically right now. We cannot allow this country to continue to just be plagued with immigrants who flood this nation, providing almost no value to it overall, and taking away jobs from native-born Americans. Native Americans who are born here and deserve those jobs. And so Steven Crowder does say, well, that's a good thing, you know, blah, 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 there's negative, and he's not completely wrong here. But, you know, Nick's argument here more echoes actually what I have found myself saying on this channel as well, which is really, to summarize it, though I'll play what Nick says for you in response. To summarize it, what I've been saying on this channel that sounds similar to it for several months now is it really is not enough. It's really not enough. And it actually goes, it falls in line with the strategy that I proposed, that is the strategy of the Republican Party, which is do the bare minimum and then use the remainder of the goal to dangle it in front of your face every 2 years in the form of an election. Well, if you like the little free sample we gave you, you know, you wanted the whole rotisserie chicken, and we gave you that little bit that we cut off the chicken wing arm and put it in a little paper cup, and you got to eat, you know, 2 bites of it. And we know you love the taste of that because that represents the much larger goal that you want. So if you like that and you want the rest of the rotisserie chicken, not just 2 bites of it, you can vote for us again, because elections are here. And if we can't keep our power, we don't get to continue pushing forward towards that goal that you want. So they always do this. It's the most sickening strategy you'll see from politicians, and the Republicans are guilty of it. And so that's really what I identify as one of the major issues with the Republican Party. Now, how Nick answers it is pretty interesting as well. So I'll play that part for you right here.
Yeah, what I would push back on is I really think that you think you're overstating some of the wins. To me, I would just say it's too little too late. I mean, as far as like open borders, that's my favorite one because Trump ran in 2016 saying, we're going to build a border wall. And why a border wall? Because it cannot be torn down. You build a physical structure, Democrats can't undo that. If it's an executive order, like Remain in Mexico or some of those other architecture, they can, and they did. And so it was really Trump's failure to build a border wall. And he enforced it through executive orders, which is why Democrats were able to come in and say, oh, we're just going to undo all of that. And you might say, well, okay, Trump has another crack at it, and the border is secure now. It's like record low crossings. There's no apprehensions at the border. However, it seems that once again, he's given up on the wall.
Yeah, and this is true. I've pointed this out several times on this channel as well, which is just the truth as well. Where is that border wall? Because we are now, I mean, Trump was talking about that wall when he announced his run for president pretty much. So it's really been over 12 years pretty much at this point that this border wall has been both a concept and then a project. And the fact of the matter is, it's not being built. It's certainly not being built fast enough. And the fact of the matter is it won't be completed by the time Trump is out of office, not at the pace that they're going. And this is the ultimate failure because no matter what Trump signs in, to his point here, executive order wise on immigration, stay in Mexico, no more immigrants passing through. The second Democrats regain control, via the executive branch, they'll undo that. And when they undo that, there's no border wall to prevent more of them from flooding in. The Democrats' favorite thing to do when it comes to replacing us Americans, us Native Americans in this country, is to just flood the border by allowing mass immigrant scum to flood in through the border unvetted, unchecked, as many as possible. The border wall stops that from happening by at least forcing them to funnel through a fucking entrance and therefore slows it down drastically. And in Trump's first term, we were told that border wall was going to be both built and paid for, if you remember correctly, by Mexico. That was his original promise, neither of which happened. The border wall was partially built, what was built in the Trump first term? A couple miles worth? Nothing effective enough, and it certainly wasn't paid for by Mexico. And there was a whole hoopla around that border wall as well. What's happening in this term? Well, again, they're constructing it, but not really. They're not really constructing it. So it's a fair point. And the point being, of course, that with the Republicans, it's the same old sad story of it's either too late or too little. They're either not doing enough or it's already too late to do anything anyway. Now, I don't believe it's too late to fix this country, but when it comes to this current modern-day Republican Party, I believe they're definitely doing way too little of an amount when it comes to work and when it comes to fulfilling the will of the people. And worse yet, I do genuinely believe, in all honesty, that for the most part, it's actually intentionally done. I've gone over my conspiracy theories on that when it comes to Republicans just seem to love being the cucks of the political system. They seem to jerk off to losing. Because it makes them appear more virtuous. I think they're more addicted to being victims and fighting the corruption of the Democrats from the losing end of the spectrum. And I think that there's also a corrupt element to that where at least several of the Republicans very likely like being on the losing end and the least powerful end so that they can sell their votes to Democrats out of convenience to help Democrats pass legislation, and they sell it. And I think that that's a very likely activity taking place, which is why the Republicans are just continually cucked and spineless. In addition to the fact, of course, that there are just, once again, way too many old boomers, and unfortunately, even it seems like a lot of Gen Xers are involved in our politics that don't have any spine or any balls, and are no doubt just political cucks that don't know what it's like to take a stand for anything. So, but I'm going to continue on here. Let's see, 40. Yeah, so Steven Crowder responds to this, and he responds by correcting Nick on the border wall. And I found this interesting as well. He says, no, Nick, you've got it wrong. So take a listen to this next part right here.
You've got
That's incorrect.
coming up.
That's incorrect. Nick, he has built more of the wall in his first 6 months than all 4 years of Biden. And it's on track to be done in 2027. Let's call it 28. It's
How
just
much
not
wall has he
factually
built this year?
This last year's been, as I understand it, hundreds of feet, and they're going to be putting up digital security, right, because there's...
Okay, so I have a massive problem with that. First and foremost, he says, well, he's built more of the wall in the first 6 months of his administration than in all 4 years of Biden. Yeah, no shit. The Democrats don't want a border wall. They love open immigration. They want to replace us in our own country with third world scum who will come in and be promised all this free shit by Democrats who, of course, us, the Native Americans, with our tax dollars pay for. We essentially pay for our own replacement, us responsible working class heritage Americans. We actually work, and then our money goes towards paying for the benefits of all of the scum immigrants in this country who are here to replace us. And then those scum immigrants who receive all of these handouts courtesy of our taxpayer dollars, then in turn vote Democrat to continue to receive more free shit. They don't deserve to be here. And if I was in charge, obviously, I would just send ICE door to door and ask for papers. Every single illegal immigrant needs to go. I'd be looking for reasons to revoke citizenships. Like, we need to just get rid of these people, as many of them as possible, and restore this country back to heritage Americans. People who were born here legally, that's the bare minimum standard for what an American citizen is. We draw the line there. If you're an anchor baby, out you go. If you snuck here illegally, even 40 years ago, out you go. All need to go, of all age ranges. 5-year-olds, 95-year-olds. If they're not here legally, out they go. Now, he says, well, that's wrong. And, first of all, to just point out the issue with that, again, yeah, Biden didn't build nearly as much of the border wall as Trump did in 6 months in all of Biden's 4 years. Yeah, no shit. Secondly, he says, well, how much Nick asks how much has been built. He says, well, hundreds of feet. My dude, hundreds of feet? Well, what does that even equate to? Not even a mile? Like, again, what is this? Hundreds of feet. Okay, so in 6 months, he's built hundreds of feet. What does that mean in 12 months? Maybe 1,000 feet, maybe 2,000 feet. So if he's building 2,000 feet of border wall, let's say, in 1 year, what will he have built in 4 years? 8,000 feet? What is that? Is that like a mile and a half? Again, that's not going to be enough. Literally, it's just not going to be enough. There's no way that they're going to be able to build the full border wall spanning across the entirety of the southern border in Trump's term if they continue at this pace. Hundreds of feet is actually unacceptable, completely unacceptable. I want to see a border wall with barbed wire on the top. I want it so that if somebody tries to climb over that bitch, they wind up slicing themselves on it and falling right back down into Mexico. And I want that spanning across all southern states. Hundreds of feet, that's nothing. So I was a little upset with that, and I just wanted to highlight that moment there. But moving on from that even, we have right here, I'll continue playing this because he goes on to continue making a statement here. I'm going to play the rest here.
Certain areas and terrain that are a little bit more complicated, but more than Biden in 4 years. And you're saying vote for those people for 4 years. So there is a difference building anything than nothing. And I agree with you, by the way, like a good example, H-1Bs. Remember, you ran those billboards, right?
Yeah.
And you and I were on the same page. I don't know if you saw this. I was going hard at Elon Musk on X, on H-1Bs, and President Trump. And by the way, I got into an argument with Vivek in person. I suggested a 3-point plan. One of them was a 6-figure fee. So you put up, have you told your audience about the unfathomable wins on H-1Bs?
So then he brings up H-1Bs, and what he's saying is, well, there was an 87% reduction in H-1Bs that were allowed into this country, which is true to some extent, but there's a little bit of a deceptiveness behind that statement, and more so because Nick points out, well, they hit the cap every year, which is also true, and so somewhere in between both those arguments lies the real truth, but the most important part to focus on here is that, again, not only should the entirety of the border wall be built under a Republican president, but also the H-1B visa program, a reduction, okay, that's not bad news, I suppose. But I didn't vote for a Republican. I didn't vote conservative as a social and fiscal conservative to watch the Congress, the House and the Senate be filled up red, and to watch the executive go red, and to watch all states in America shift more to the red, mind you, including the blue ones. They became less blue in 2024. I didn't watch all of that happen to then see a massive reduction in H-1B visas. I voted so that the H-1B visa program could be nuked like annihilated, dismantled, and destroyed within the first week of the Trump administration. I voted so that I could see Trump sign something or get something passed. If that has to go through some form of legislation, if it has to go through the legislative branch for some reason, work on it, get it done, undo what it was Bush in 1990 who did this. And I want to see that annihilated. I don't want to see any more Jeets coming into this country from India, replacing me, replacing people who look like me, replacing people who look like my friends, some of whom are African American friends. They're heritage African Americans, in my opinion. I don't want to see that anymore. I want to totally see H-1B visa programs utterly destroyed. Like destroyed. That needs to go away. It should have never been made into a concept. It is destructive to our American way of life, and it harms every single American. So that's the real argument here. And Steven Crowder's now, well, it's 87% reduction. It should be gone. The fact that you're settling for that is already a problem. It's a toe the party line argument. They should just be gone. H-1B visas shouldn't be a thing anymore. So right away, again, I take issue with this. Now, going on from here, the H-1B visa reduction, he goes on, there's a discussion about how it will be worse with Democrats, which is also a fair point, and I'm going to play that next.
Well, I believe they hit the cap for H-1Bs last year, did they not, in 2025?
So 26% reduction in issuances, and new overseas H-1Bs, meaning people who are not in this country, down 87%. They were up anywhere from 20 to 90% under Biden. The denial rate was like 1%, 2% on a really good day. 87% reduction on new overseas H-1Bs with a $100,000 fee. If you put up billboards and people are upset about that, and you and I are in the same camp, have you told your audience about that win? That's the biggest shift we've ever seen in H-1Bs. It's not even close.
Again, yeah, I just don't think that's really, when you say they're building hundreds of feet of border wall, that's more than Biden. Well, there's a 26% reduction in H-1Bs. They hit the cap, I believe.
87%. And here's why. 87%. Here's why. You know why. And Nick, let's both pretend that we're smart enough.
Okay.
The president has broad powers over people coming into this country, right? New H-1Bs. And I see this a lot, where he gets no credit for executive orders. But then, when things get blocked and cut, they also blame Donald Trump. Well, why didn't he get these cuts? Well, that's because of 100% of Democrats. And yes, some feckless Republicans. We should know them by name, the Thunes, the Murkowskis, the Collins of the world, who should be voted out. But he has broad powers on who's coming in the country.
I want to also just take the time to point this out as well. So he just acknowledges as well one of the major problems in initially attempting to defend President Donald Trump, who he says is receiving more blame than he should, by essentially saying, well, sure, the buck stops with Trump and he's the executive, etc. But I think it's unfair that Trump receives all of the blame for this, because a lot of the Republicans that are in Congress, they're in the House and the Senate, etc., they're refusing to go along with the program. This is what his argument is when it comes to sparing Trump from all of the grief, and when it comes to properly drawing attention to all who are responsible for the massive shortcomings of this current Trump administration, in response to Nick Fuentes' argument about H-1B visas hitting their cap and how they still exist, etc. And I want to point something out here. Steven Crowder is the one who is arguing against Nick Fuentes' strategy of intentionally voting Democrat, which would in turn oust all of the Republicans in the legislative branch who are the problem. And he says, well, he acknowledges it basically. He says, well, yeah, they're part of the problem. Those Republicans, we know them by name. And in doing so, literally does, like I just stated, he acknowledges that, yes, they're the problem. And essentially, Nick's strategy is in my opinion, made more valid in doing so by saying, yeah, we're going to vote Democrat. It will halt the Trump administration. It will put a halt on all of the wrongdoings of the current GOP establishment. And it will get rid of a lot of these rhinos and these neocons who nobody wants because they don't represent us. And so I found that interesting as well, because he basically admits it and says, yeah, well, the Congress, the House and the Senate, they're not good either. It's like, yeah, that's actually the point. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to take up the mantle of voting Democrat here. I actually still think I don't know if I could bring myself to do that. I despise abortion. I despise transgenderism. I despise feminism, globalism, all of this, open borders, immigration. I despise all of these concepts that the Democrats stand for. But I understand the strategy of Nick. And I think when it comes to the debate here, Steven Crowder, I think, accidentally gave several concessions to Nick's strategy without even really thinking it through. And that's another example. Mentioning Brandon Herrera as a dark horse candidate who turned down APAC funding and is now going to go on to win is another example of that as well, even though later on I'll play the clip again where he basically winds up saying, well, I don't believe a dark horse candidate will rise up and or the donors will only support a moderate Republican who nobody wants. But then he says, well, Brandon Herrera did it. And then there's James Fishback and there's Dan Bilzerian, even if he's not that smart. And there's, other dark horse candidates we've seen now decisively win, actually, or who are on good campaign trails. So I found that interesting as well. In addition to that, I wanted to, let's see, there was a little bit left here I found interesting, I think, because I wrote down the timestamp to go from that. So I'll play a little bit more here.
You can slap 100,000 on that, and he did, 87% reduction. To deal with the bulk of H-1Bs, people who are extending them, that would require an act of Congress. So the most potent tool that he has as president, he enacted an 87% reduction in new people coming over. People should know that if they're going to say both sides are the same.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm just not sure, but I believe he hit the cap for H-1Bs last year.
And real quick, too, he says people should know that if they're going to start discussing it from the standpoint of both sides being the same. Well, truly nobody who studies this, nobody who pays attention, nobody who reads the news and has critical analysis capabilities looks at it from the standpoint of both sides are the same. We hear the commonly overused terms two wings on the same bird. This is appropriate to say at times when it comes to certain agendas. But I think the realization has been made clear to most Americans, and that's why nobody is saying this, that both sides are the same, because they're not. Both sides are not only different, but they're increasingly becoming more different. They're growing apart. Both sides are going down the path of radicalization. The Democrats went there first in the form of liberal progressivism, which peaked under Biden, where we saw all kinds of nonsense rainbow displays on the White House for Easter, and we saw the transgender movement hit its full stride and bloom, where the topic of, displaying pornographic images in the form of children's books to fourth graders in school was being condoned by the administration and all of the disgusting Democrats. The topic of gender, or I should say genitalia mutilation for children who are taught from a young age now in certain schools by certain teachers. I have recordings of those, by the way, telling first graders that they were probably meant to be born the opposite gender, and all of the inherent problems that lie in that, with the increase in autism rates and how autistic children are more likely to obsess on what they feel is wrong with themselves, leads to these kind of dilemmas. This all peaked under Biden. Liberal progressivism not only hit its stride, but it really grew to an extreme that was so insufferable that many moderate Democrats felt isolated enough to support Trump in 2024, alongside, of course, many more independents who made up a large majority of the MAGA coalition. Now we're seeing the same extremes starting to take place in the GOP as a result of the massive betrayal that we've all experienced as conservatives this year in 2026 when it comes to the war in Iran mainly, but as well as the withholding of the Epstein files and several other minor issues too. And so now where does the extreme right wind up going as it becomes more extreme is another valid question to ask. And really this is what's happening right now. And it's all going to culminate in one side gaining power and doing its best to ensure, in all honesty, this is the raw truth. If you can't handle this, go fuck yourself. This is the raw truth. One side, as they grow apart in more of an extreme manner, will grow in enough power to take that power and then do everything they can to never give it up again. And it really is a race in that direction at this point to see who can get that power first. And really, the strategy boils down even more when it comes to Nick in voting Democrat in 2026 to making way for a right-wing kind of conservative candidate who will be far enough right for not only our liking, but far enough right to be put in a position that can actually save this country. Because if it's a moderate Republican in 2028 versus an extreme Democrat who appeals to the Democrat Party and is now going in with the momentum of all of Trump's failures in this term, what will be his failures even more in the future in this term in 2028, that Democrat's going to win anyway, and then it's all over anyway, because the moderate Republican, there won't be enough of an appetite with young voters especially, we're talking Gen Z and probably most millennial men, there won't be enough of an appetite for a moderate, I believe they even mention him, like a Mitt Romney type. That's just a guaranteed loss. And you kind of would have a Mitt Romney type in the form of Marco Rubio, right? So that's also part of it. But nobody is saying that both sides are like identical. They're very clearly not. In fact, in my opinion, both sides couldn't be further apart from a social standpoint. Social values on both sides are so radically opposite that the horseshoe theory just no longer even applies, what people call that. The only way that both sides are alike are when it comes to big donor money, and what it really comes down to being, the Zionist agenda movement, the Israeli foreign government issue. Both sides seem to be coming together on that, but they can't even make up their minds on why it's happening, what Zionism actually is, what the actual problem is with Israel, etc. And so even there are differences. 40, let's see, where did I leave off here? Yeah, okay. So I'm going to keep playing it just a little bit more here.
You're always going to hit the cap when you're talking about people extending H-1Bs. What we're talking about is new people, new Bajeets coming in, right? $100,000, and this is it. Also, by the way, this is your job, my job, as commentators. It shifts that Overton window where it's like, hey, we were told that they were bringing in, the Haji Elon Musk or the next brown Nikolai Tesla. Well, $100,000 fee would mean nothing. Instead, people now know these were people coming in to undercut Americans as cheap labor. So that number matters a lot. If Congress would act, you're not going to have it, especially not with more Democrats.
Yeah, so, and he's not wrong. The Democrats are certainly not going to fix this. We can all acknowledge that. The Democrats love this because they hate Americans that look like me, especially. They hate me. They know that I'm not ever going to be a social liberal, and so they despise me. And they want me to fulfill my role as the tax cattle that funds all of their social programs, once again, that goes towards supporting all of their foreign illegal immigrant scum that they allow into this country. And so that's true. It's inevitably true. But the real demonstration here, and the real argument, another real argument being made, is essentially, well, the Democrats are already the devil we know because we've lived through them in the form of Biden, in the form of Obama, even to varying degrees. And really, it's almost better to be stabbed in the front and to see it coming. If you're going to take the risk of voting blue in the midterms in 2026 to finish off this disgusting, useless administration, the Trump administration, and ensure their ultimate demise when it comes to all of them never being able to run in the 2028 primaries in exchange for the hope of the fact that some dark horse Republican candidate will rise up that we can actually get behind, well, that's kind of fair, but really, that's the risk is, well, what if the dark horse never comes and we lose anyway? Well, we're going to lose. And then we're going to be stabbed in the front by the Democrats, but at least we know what to expect, rather than doing what we did in 2024, which was vote for Trump after all of these promises which were made, and what we really seemed like, in all honesty, were promises he was going to make good on, especially in the start of this administration last year. The first 3 months, I was enjoying Trump. You can see that on this channel. I was loving life. And it all went downhill so fucking fast, and now it's nothing of what I want and everything of what I didn't want, which means I was stabbed in the back. And as a conservative, you have to understand, you've been stabbed in the back and utterly betrayed. And so that goes back to the main argument again. If you vote Republican at this point, you're literally a cuck. If you vote for any of these faces right now that they're floating out there, like Marco Rubio or J.D. Vance, if you earnestly sit there and you wet your knickers over the idea of a Marco Rubio presidency or a J.D. Vance presidency because he has a cool meme, well, you're a cuck. You're literally a cuck, and you're a useless voter. And you're actually part of the problem in this country. But going on beyond that, I wanted to keep going with this because Nick does also make another good counter argument here. It's one that if you've been a longtime viewer on this channel, you'll be familiar with it because I've been saying this for the longest time on this channel.
Further and say, what about all this talk about seasonal farm visas? What about this mass deportations? We're going to exempt agricultural workers, we're going to exempt farm workers, hospitality, luncheonettes, we're not going to deport anybody other than the criminal illegals. This is what I mean. It's like this, I think maybe where we're getting stuck is it's not as if things are not improving. Like, you're 100% right.
And I've said that too. What about our farmers? They said, sir, you got to take it easy on our farmers. If you've been a longtime viewer on this channel, you've heard me make fun of Trump saying that for the longest time now because, again, another betrayal. I don't care about the farmers. We wind up, by the way, bailing out most farmers in this country every single year anyway. Did you know that? So many farmers spend all of the season growing shit, and then they basically say, oh, help me, there was a drought, and I barely grew what I needed, and I'm behind. And we go, no problem, we'll just bail you out. So when the farmers then say, well, I need this cheap immigrant labor, which is basically slave labor, right? And the liberal, it's so funny that the liberals always, they don't even realize what they're advocating for when they promote this shit. But the liberals will say, well, those farmers, they need those immigrant workers. Yeah, why? Well, because the farmers get away with paying them $2.75 an hour. Oh, you mean like slave labor? How about we just bring back slavery then? Is that better for you then? Because slavery would actually wind up reducing the cost of all that produce even more than $2.75 per hour labor would. How about we just do slavery? You're okay with those immigrants coming in then and being taken advantage of by the farmers? I thought the Democrats love illegal immigrants and want to give them a chance at a better life here in this country, even though I radically oppose that viewpoint and think that we don't owe them anything. But I thought that's what the Democrats stood for. Oh, you mean, okay, so the farmers can come in and just exploit the ever-living fuck out of them. They can sleep in the fields half naked and make $2.75 an hour? Is that good for you, Democrats? Is that what you like then? That's interesting. How about we just bring back slavery, right? So I pointed that out, and I've basically said, I don't care. We bail out the farmers anyway. How about we force the farmers by removing all of their illegal immigrant scum workers and deport them back over to Mexico where they came from and replace them with Americans who deserve a real job that pays good? Yeah, the argument is the farmers will have to raise the prices then on the produce. Well, the farmers get bailed out, so how about we just work it in for a brief period of time, for a readjustment period of, I don't know, 2 or 3 years to allow, or 4 or 5 years even, to allow the farmers to bounce back and get reacclimated to the idea that they have to hire Americans for their farm in America, and then they have to pay those Americans a livable wage? How about we just bail the farmers out then anyway, like we pretty much do all the time? How about that? But I've talked about that at length on this channel for months, okay? We subsidize and bail out the farmers all the time. I think they'll be fine if they have to pay an American worker 4 times more per hour what they're used to paying an illegal immigrant. I think they'll be fine because truthfully, we give them money and we help them out every year anyway. So we can just do that, and then in doing so ensure that at least the Americans are taking the jobs that are rightfully theirs.
Department of Labor and a DHS, they are making some policy changes. The $100,000 fee, I think that's great, and that's a great start. And cutting down the new overseas visas, that's great too. But once again, we were promised mass deportations. What's more, yet 10 million illegals come in under Biden. And so this is why I say it's just like too little too late.
I'd say more
like,
than 10, I bet 12 to 20, depending on how you count it, but a lot.
Sure. Well, and
too many.
You know,
we agree, too many.
But we don't even know how many deportations there are because ICE doesn't publish the data anymore. We don't have new official data on removals from the government since December 2024 from the Biden administration.
I've made this point on this channel all the time as well, by the way, and saying that the Department of Homeland Security is deliberately not publishing the mass deportation numbers because you get the goy slop propaganda from the MAGA chuds out there who will tell you, well, Trump is deporting so many illegal immigrants, blah, blah, blah. They get mad when I say, well, Obama deported more in his first term as president in 2009 than Trump did in his first year last year. And you'll get these kind of arguments. Well, there were more immigrants to deport then. What does that have to do with the fact that Trump should be deporting infinitely more immigrants per year and should be capable of doing so? If there were more immigrants in Obama's term to deport, and that's why he did it, Trump could just continually put out more of immigration, anti-immigration force. He could put out more people into the field to rack up more deportations. But unfortunately, we can't spend the funding on that. We've got a war for Israel to fight, you stupid goy. So you'll suffer the idea of having to live with all of these illegals who are taking your apartments, your houses, and your job. But beyond that, you know, the bottom line is also, you know, DHS not publishing the number should tell you everything you need to know. If you know how to read in between lines, you know what that means. So the common argument is always, well, the self-deportations were 1.5 million last year. That can't be tracked or proven. That's being overinflated for propaganda. And the fact that the DHS is not tracking the deportations, unlike how they were doing for Biden, by the way, should also tell you a lot without putting it into words. The problem is, of course, most people are sub-IQ scum, and they don't really know how to read in between the lines or think critically like that. So, but that is, you've heard that on this channel several times as well. So I felt like just addressing that quickly, too, because it's another fair point being made here.
Administration. So it's like, you know, what we're being promised, and this, by the way, gets back to how radical it needs to be. It's like, because you could always say, and you wouldn't be wrong, at all, that Republicans are going to be better. Are they going to build more border wall? Are we going to have less H-1Bs? Are we going to have more deportations? Absolutely. But when you actually look at the numbers, it's like, okay, well, they brought in 10 to 20 million in 4 years. Right. Even if the numbers are true and they say we arrested 600,000, maybe we only removed 300,000, you're not even making a dent in that. And you could say, well, anything counts. I would say it doesn't make a difference. Like, not really. 600,000 against 20 million? Not really. And that's where I would say I favor taking the risk of getting something more radical than what we know, which is getting something that won't be anything.
It's a fair point, and it's the truth. And it's another sad reality that people really do not want to admit. But yes, I've said this before. What I would consider, I actually said this, I think, last year on this channel at the start of Trump's first term. What I would consider a success for Trump's administration, these 4 years of Trump, would be for him to be deporting 1.5 million illegal immigrants per year. Not self-deportations, but actual internal removals. That's what I would consider Trump. That's what would make Trump a success in my eyes. He needs to at least be deporting it by the time it's all said and done. To make a dent, it would be 6 million by the time he's done as president, or at least 5 million even. And we're not on pace probably to even hit 2 or 3. So it's a massive problem, and he's completely right. It's not going to make enough of a dent, especially if the Democrats wind up getting it in 2028 anyway and just being able to take power and undo all of it, because it takes so much longer to clean up a mess than it does to make a mess. So the Democrats can reopen the floodgates, especially if that border wall's not finished, which it won't be. And they'll pour right in mass numbers, and it'll all be undone in the blink of an eye. And it's again, we don't vote for a little bit more to be done than what would be done against us by Democrats. We vote for radical change, and that's the argument here. And again, the generation gap is playing out here now. Steven Crowder and Nick Fuentes are they're not that far apart in age, and that's why I think they're arguing in such good faith with each other, and that's why I like to see it. But that is the attitude that you're seeing grow amongst young men, which is essentially an attitude of, well, if Republicans have all the power, why the fuck is shit not getting done, basically? And why isn't it getting done faster and more thoroughly, right? Why does it have to be a slow crawl when we control everything, at least on paper? So yeah, I found that interesting. Now, Nick will go on to expand on this, which is he made some other statements that I also found very intriguing, because again, I'll briefly reiterate one of the main theories that I have, or really it's a pattern that I've noticed that I've talked about on this channel in the past, which is that Republicans deliberately slow roll it. They deliberately crawl towards the agenda and the objective in their administrations and while they're in power, knowing that elections are coming up in the future that they'll be up for re-election in. And so the idea is accomplish just enough to be able to brag about it and say, well, look what I did for you. Well, definitely not putting the pedal to the metal, not flooring it. You ease down on the pedal when you take power. You go 20 miles an hour instead of 90 miles an hour like you need to. And by going 20 miles an hour, you at least get somewhere. And you're going at least in the opposite direction as the opposition party is. So people are marginally happier. And then when you're up for re-election, you dangle what you have accomplished and you say, well, look what I did. And you're going to vote for me again if you want this to keep going on, because otherwise it's all going to be the opposite. And if you vote for me, I'll keep going. And then, of course, when they vote for you, you do the same thing. You slow roll it. You go 20 miles an hour down a road you should be going 90 or 100 miles per hour on. And that's how this works. And I've said that on this channel, and I've said that's what I've been most frustrated with the Republicans about, is just how they do that, the tactics. The Democrats do it too, but the Republicans really are the masters at it. Now, what Nick is about to point out here, I found even more fascinating. It's a concept that I hadn't fully contemplated, though I've acknowledged, again, the farmers, and I have in the past acknowledged how deporting illegal immigrants would negatively affect our GDP, and I said it's a sacrifice we'd have to make, and it's such a sacrifice that it would take an ideologue-type leader to get into office in order to fulfill, because you'd have to make the sacrifice play as the president to really follow through on massive, massive deportations. We're talking deporting millions upon millions of illegal immigrants in your term. Yes, the American GDP would now tank because what has been done cannot be undone pain-free. I have acknowledged that. But even better, Nick takes it a step further than I ever have, and this was probably one of the more fascinating moments for me watching this live this morning. Thank you for the gift, by the way, Michael Hansen, a floating heart. I really appreciate that. I need the love right now. This country is fucking doomed, so thank you. I appreciate you. But Nick takes this a step further, and this is like a five-head kind of analysis that I didn't fully think through the way that he did. So take a listen to this. Give me 1 second here. I had to jump forward on the video, and now there's all this stupid fucking buffering.
And then I would add on top of that, and maybe this is going to be controversial, I actually don't think Republicans are really all that against illegal immigration. I think that Democrats and Republicans maybe wanted the illegals here because there was a significant labor shortage after the pandemic ended. People were slow to return to work. They were being paid too much. And, so you could say, like, if only Republicans had won, then there wouldn't be 10 to 20 million illegals.
What numbers do you have to back that up? First off,
that's fascinating. A very interesting thought, and it might not be wrong, unfortunately. Maybe the Republicans actually don't want the mass deportations the way that they say they do. I always thought that, they weren't incentivized to follow through on them at great detail, again, because of the GDP issue. But he cites the labor shortage after COVID, which is somewhat valid. I actually don't think the labor shortage reason is super valid. But more importantly, the idea that the Republicans really just pretend like they care about mass deportations and halting immigration, while really, in all honesty, not even believing in that, but just saying it as a popular talking point, a true Republican populism point. That is something I could totally get behind and honestly rationalize and say, yeah, sadly, that might be true with many of our Republicans, which would, again, explain the lack of progress that we get when it comes to these fuckers in office. So I found that fascinating. And now Steven Crowder, Nick. Nick goes on from here to make another point about the GOP, which ties in perfectly with the whole maybe they don't want mass deportations kind of thought process. He goes on to make another pretty strong point as well here. I'm going to play that right now.
Saying punish them. And I guess the larger point is maybe we just disagree on the level of complicity of the Republicans. I think they're utterly complicit because even going back to, and this is formative for me, Trump won in 2016 saying border wall, and you remember Republicans wouldn't give him more than $1.8 billion for that little fence in the Rio Grande Valley. And they said, no, we're going to focus on Obamacare and the tax cut. We'll do the border wall after the midterms, which they lost.
It's funny too because that's completely accurate, and that is the strategy. Again, like I said, they dangle it in your face. We'll do the border wall after midterms. That's what happened. Why? Well, because if you remember correctly, Trump was having a hard time in his first term and they don't talk about this, so I'm gonna bring this back. Was having a hard time in his first term when it comes to immigration as it was. The children in cages storyline wound up being so controversial, despite the fact that Obama chucked tons of children in cages during his administration for deportations. They were, of course, saying, well, Trump doing it is worse because the cages are worse somehow. It was a bunch of pussified nonsense. But the bottom line is, it's completely true. It's completely true. And so Trump, sensing the massive issues in his first term with the deportations and immigration, wound up backing off of those and basically saying it's got to stop for now. We got to get past the midterms first. And so as a result of that, he halted all of the immigration agenda in his first term by basically saying, we got to stop the immigration, we got to stop the deportations, and we can't do the border wall until the midterms are behind us, which of course was a disaster, as he points out, because what happens after the midterms, it goes blue, and then it never gets done the way that Trump had intended. And so they continually just come up with excuses. We're seeing it play out right now. It is literally history repeating itself. Trump had already toned down the rhetoric this term now when it comes to mass deportations. Don't use that word is now the memo for the Trump administration. Do not use that word, he says. It's the worst of the worst now. That's all we're going to get rid of. We can't continue to use that word. It's political poison, right? So we see it playing out this way now. What are midterms going to look like this year? It's going to be a blue wave. It's going to be a complete wash of the GOP, and then we're never going to get the mass deportations that we wanted. So It's already playing out verbatim. It's like history repeating itself. It's completely true. And what's the strategy again? It's what I just said, where I literally said, you know, they dangle the promises in front of your face. They literally dangle it in front of your face, and they say, well, you got to keep voting for us because this is what you'll get if you vote for us. So that's true, literally true, and I found that also very to be a very strong point made here. I'm going to keep playing a little bit more of this little clip here.
And then they shrugged and said,
So
oh,
Nick,
well.
but now be accurate with your audience. Why wasn't the border wall built? Was it for the same reason that it was completely paused after the 2020 midterms? In other words, you say Republicans, do you mean Democrats? And so they said the perfect is the enemy of the good, and they got done what they could get done at that time. It would be like people in the future saying, he didn't do anything about H-1B visa extensions. Well, sure, because he can't. It'll be blocked 100% by Democrats, maybe 10 to 15, 20% Republicans, but he used the most potent tool at his disposal, right? So you put all this in the same basket, like Republicans didn't. No, they weren't able to.
Republicans weren't able to. And again, this points out the massive major issue, in my opinion, when it comes to how so many Republican voters view the party. Why are we the fucking victims when, like they've already acknowledged was true, in the beginning first half of Trump's first term, they controlled everything, and now they do it again. They have complete control right now. How come the sentence Republicans aren't able to is even being uttered when we control, again, the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, and the executive? Those are words right now that Republican voters should never be hearing. We should never be hearing while we have complete control in government. We're not able to do that. And that's the frustration that's building up with young men who still have healthy testosterone levels and are full of righteous indignation and rage against the machine at this point, and actually expected something to get done when they voted for the party that they did. Now to be left with nothing but utter disappointment, half-fulfilled promises at best. It's no longer good enough. We're at the breaking point when it comes to our political system here, and the fracture is largely being created as a result of the simultaneous generational gap we're experiencing in our entire society right now. The boomers, they don't care so long as it's a red candidate, because they want their assets protected long enough so that they can die before any of the consequences of the past 50 years of their voting takes effect. The boomers will literally tell you, it's our fucking problem to deal with now. That's on you. You've got to solve it. We're going to die soon, and we just want to enjoy the rest of our life. Fuck you. We're not towing this party line anymore, and the Republican Party is a complete sham. We need a powerful executive branch, and we need a powerful legislative branch when it's red, and we've got neither. We've got Trump, an 80-year-old cuck, who bows to federal low-level district court federal judges and bows and caves to midterm election pressure for mass deportations, but then simultaneously also, of course, and most importantly, bows to Benjamin Netanyahu, pulls out his chair for him, slides him back in, tucks him in at night probably at this point, allows him into the Situation Room even, which no foreign leader should ever find himself in, and then wages a new Middle East war on his behalf. That's the ultimate political poison, but we're there doing that, but we can't do mass deportations. The border wall's not being built fast enough. None of it's happening. Excuse me. I'm getting better, but I'm still a little sick. None of it's happening, and Republicans control everything. So what's the fucking excuse? Because normally the excuse is, well, the big bad blue meanies, the Democrats, they stopped us. What's stopping us now? Nothing other than Republicans, which again goes back to the main point of Nick's argument being vote blue, vote Democrat in the midterms, because one, the Republicans don't deserve our vote. Two, by doing this, you oust many of these Republicans who are traitors and have utterly betrayed this nation. And three, in doing so, you finish off this disgusting administration and ruin the reputation of all those involved, so that a Republican primary in 2028 is more fair. It has more opportunities for future candidates to rise up, since the obvious direction they're taking us in is basically saying, good, you voted for Trump, you good little goyim. Look at this Iran war. You must be so proud. Oh, you're not? Well, that's a shame. Anyways, you're going to vote for J.D. Vance in 2028. or you're going to vote for Marco Rubio. We haven't decided yet, but those are your two options, and you better pick one of them. No, that's not good enough, and that is a strategy, and it's made clear as day. And despite the fact that Crowder does put up some good arguments against this, he also simultaneously, pretty much accidentally, argues in favor of Nick's strategy sometimes by acknowledging again Brandon Herrera, the candidate turning down AIPAC funding, or even acknowledging the fact that the Republicans right now are the reason why we're not getting anything done. Yeah, of course the Democrats are all no. That should be expected, but they're a minority party. It's the Republicans that are the problem. But for some reason, we have to vote Republican, I guess. Toe that party line. Because maybe eventually, if we do, then, excuse me again, then we'll get the candidate we deserve. And, I just don't see it necessarily playing out that way. I think, in all honesty, those candidates are never coming unless things get really bad first. And don't kid yourself. You scum in chat, you all deserve to lose everything. None of you deserve anything you have. All of you are just as complicit as the worst neocons out there. You're inactive, you're lazy, you're not active in politics whatsoever for the most part. Sure, you're sitting down watching this show, but you're not doing anything about this. And if anything, secretly or otherwise, you'll vote Republican because you're too afraid, in all honesty, to do anything else. Beyond that, of course, our founding fathers would have never tolerated this current political system, but America as a whole is guilty of tolerating all of the corruption and fraud going on in this government. And because of that guilt, we deserve the destruction that is probably coming our way. I mean, at this point, I don't see how it gets any better in the short term. And so as a result of that, prepare for some of the hardest times you've ever lived through. And while you're living through it, be sure to realize you fucking deserve this. You deserve to suffer. And while you're suffering, maybe that will wind up becoming the inevitable wake-up call for you that you must vote for something much more real rather than towing the party line and voting for subpar candidates. Stop being a cuck. When you're a cuck, you get fucked, and not in the good way. Now, I want to move on from there. I have a few more clips I wanted to play here, but he goes on again to expand on this notion just a little bit as well. The ultimate kind of tired of excuses type thing here. So, and again, it's another sentiment that I deeply agree with.
Where it's like every cycle there's this excuse. It's like, well, we did this, we couldn't do that, there's politics, and this is a brief example I'll give. They allocated in the big beautiful bill, what was it, $200 billion, $190 billion for DHS. Significant portion of that goes to ICE. And then they gave up on deportations in January because they said, well, this is not popular for the midterms. Then they launched the most unpopular war in modern history in Iran. It's like if you can eat a S-word sandwich, I don't know if you swear on this show.
You can say whatever you want. Okay. It's rebel, for God's sake.
I know Alex Jones, he's on radio, so, but, they want to see shit. Yeah, yeah, turmeric. Yeah. They want us to eat a shit sandwich on Iran, but then on deportations, they go, oh, well, what about the midterms? So to me, these come across as like excuses, but I do want to get into...
And they are excuses. They're excuses from a very cucked conservative GOP. Very cucked. They're not interested in representing you. They never were. And I share in that sentiment completely. I've said the same shit on this channel at length multiple different times. It's just inexplicable. It's just completely true at this point. Now, Steven Crowder argues a little bit against Nick's idea here of a dark horse candidate rising up, etc. And I wanted to play this because it's Crowder's warning, essentially. It's his objection. It's his objection first, and then he gives a warning that is a fair warning, in my opinion. So I'm going to skip to that part next.
Long game, and you need that answer for people to take it on faith. Otherwise, it's just snake handling.
Well, I think that, once again, either way, you can take my word for it or not, but what isn't going to work is Vance and Rubio. Like, that's a zero-win proposition. You can sit there and say, well, but that's better than a Democrat. At least that's concrete. I would say it's concrete that we're going to lose. It's concrete that if we get a continuation of this, we're going to get more of this, and this is not working. So rather than trying something that isn't working, I want to give a chance that something might work. And if people want to take a leap of faith, then I think that's where they need to go. But, the way it is right now...
not working. I guess you would have to define working, right? So, again, this is, right, okay, first net negative migration country, right, for over 30 years.
See, I dispute that. I don't think that's true.
Okay. Go ahead, dispute it.
I think now, that it's net negative migration.
They go on here to discuss numbers and breakdowns of those numbers. I've done that on this channel as well in the past. I've discussed several of the issues that I have. I'm actually going to take this jacket off. It's like so weird this time of year where it's like spring summer, so it's like 1 minute it's cold, the next minute I'm like dying, I'm sweating. I was outside in the rain today, now I'm fucking sweating like crazy from the jacket being on. So they go on to discuss numbers, etc. I've done the breakdowns on those. You can interpret those for yourself. Like they acknowledged and like I've discussed, the DHS is not reporting on the deportations that have been carried out last year. They're hiding the numbers. That should tell you really all that you need to know, truthfully. But regardless, I wanted to get on. This is Crowder's warning about Nick's strategy here. This is at one. Let me see here. There we go.
The ones DEI in the federal government, if Democrats get the risk too, we won't be able to have this conversation. We both have to agree on that. If the Democrats seize power, first off, they're going to pack the courts. This is the plan. People need to know it. They will pack the courts. They want to go to 13. They want to make Puerto Rico a state. They want to grant all illegal aliens and any temporary citizens the right to vote and undo everything, right? And that would include deplatforming. That's the risk. That's the plan. So we can't just, and I'm not saying you're lying, but we can't just take your word for it to take that risk. You can understand that.
And it's a fair point, and I've addressed this. This channel will, fucking. Sorry about that, guys. I accidentally hit my tripod and it released my phone. I've given this warning as well, and I've acknowledged this as a conservative streamer on here. If the Democrats take power in 2028, not so much 2026, but if they take power in 2028, this channel's gone. They'll delete this channel immediately. I've experienced Democrat censorship before on my Instagram back in the day when I was very outspoken against COVID and providing people with actual facts about COVID and how it was all fucking bullshit, really. It was nothing but a glorified flu that 98-year-olds with pouring systems were dying from, who ultimately would have died from, being sneezed on by pretty much anybody anyway. And so I've experienced that. My posts were removed. My account was shadow banned. My account was almost deleted at one point. And I turned out to be completely correct, by the way, with pretty much everything I said. I called it an experimental vaccine. It absolutely was. I said it would have horrendous side effects for people. It absolutely did. The reports are now official on that. They've been released. There's been acknowledgement of this. And now there's a lot of angry people out there. But again, if you took that shot, it's your fucking fault. And, you're going to face the consequences of that for being such a pussy and caving to social pressure. I myself am a pureblood, and I stand here very proudly acknowledging that. I never took any of that bullshit. I never wore those stupid face diapers like a cuck, like many people in the chat probably did. But I experienced the censorship as a result of that, in person and online. I was kicked out of stores for not wearing a fucking face diaper on my face because I want to breathe freely. Imagine that. I want to breathe fresh air. As if somehow we were ever going to be convinced that was bad. And unfortunately, many of you idiot goy scum slop-eating bitches down there probably were convinced that you have to wear a piece of cloth over your face, that somehow you can smell people's fucking ass stink farts through, but are then expected to believe that it can protect you from catching a virus. You stupid little bitches. So fucking pathetic. But I experienced the censorship because of that, and it is true. Steven Crowder is right. All of this is done and reversed if Democrats take power in 28, which is essentially him acknowledging Nick Fuentes' strategy and reminding us all that there's a big risk to the strategy. And that risk is, well, if it doesn't work and Democrats take 2028 as well, it's all over. Now, Nick's main point and what Crowder continues to miss is, well, if we prop up a bunch of bullshit-ass Republican candidates that nobody will want to vote for, and again, I can't emphasize this enough, the generational gap is going to play a massive part in 2028. People are not ready for this. Everyone has been used to the last 35, 40 years of voting being based off of what the scumfuck boomers want and what they'll vote for, and how they'll remain dedicated and play the sports team like politics. Politics is not a sports game. It's not a sports game. You don't owe your loyalty to a team if it sucks, like you do with your local home team, But the boomers have always historically treated it that way. They treat it like it's sports. They're the ones that will jump up and down on election night and celebrate it as if they just won something massive like a lottery. Young people, we recognize what it's really all about. I will only vote for people who will serve my interests. I vote to be represented myself. I want to be represented by my politicians, and I want them to do my bidding and my will. That's actually what it's all about. That's why they're called representatives. And if I get the feeling that they're not going to do that, and if I get the feeling that they're just another establishment cuck shill who takes big donor money and will drop all of their promises to me at the first sign of taking power, then I just literally will not vote for them. And I'm not alone in this thought process. Not even a little bit. Many young people are sharing in this idea with me. Nick Fuentes is a great example. He goes further than I could ever imagine by saying he's just going to vote Democrat now. I literally don't know if I can muster that up within me to do that. But the bottom line is, I just won't vote. And if everything burns down, and if I lose this channel, then so fucking be it. They can take everything from me. I'm willing to go out. I'm literally willing to make that happen. And there's enough people like me in my age demographic. I'm in my early 30s. Nick's in his late 20s. Many people who watch him, I believe, are even younger than him, but still able to vote in their early and mid 20s. Many people who watch him are my age, probably, also into their 30s and even 40s, perhaps. There's going to be enough of us with this mindset in 2028 to be a problem. And this brings me to another main point here, which is, when was the last time the Republicans ever acknowledged the demographic of voters that vote for them that look like me? When was the last time they ever said, this is what we're going to do for young men in America? This is what we're going to do for young white men in America. When was the last time you've ever heard a politician at all on either side of the aisle ever say that? Well, they don't. They nowadays have no problem talking about what they'll do for the black community, for the Mexican, Latino community. They have no problem talking about Asians. Trump wants to bring in more Asian college students. He wants to protect the farmers by allowing the Latino workers up through the border to serve as basically indentured servants to farmers and make $2.75 an hour. He talks about how black people love him. But when was the last time that the white man was ever discussed by a politician? When was the last time that was ever a thing? And, despite our majority in this country shrinking as a result of the Kalergi strategy being imposed on this country, which is a Jewish Zionist strategy, of course, which is implemented mostly by Democrats and liberals, which is why you shouldn't vote for that. But despite the fact that we are a shrinking majority, we're still a majority. And now there's enough of us young people, and it's not just white men. There are black men that are on board with this as well. Because again, like I've stated in the past, there are heritage black men. I firmly believe that. Heritage black men who have a stake to claim in this country, and they're tired of not being represented as well. And so there's enough young men in general, period. The demographic that for some reason hasn't been prioritized by our politicians whatsoever. Trump is literally the boomers' last gasp right now. Everything Trump is doing appeases boomers. 401ks are up. He celebrated that last week. The stock market's doing better. He celebrated that last week. In fact, he uses both of those in correlation with each other and says it's a golden age. For who? For boomers. The housing market's not getting better. Not really. Crowder tried to say that it was, but I can tell you as a young person who's been looking at a home or trying to get into that, it's not better. I've been outbid by so many fucking Muslims at this point who are here to replace me. I can tell you right now that it's not better, especially if you're an actual Native American like I am, who's born here. And so, but boomers, they get to sell their homes for a massive profit. Their 401k they've had for 45 years now, they retired, they're making that money. The stock market's doing better, that helps them. They're living off their Social Security, which is an entitlement that my age demographic will never receive. So it's a golden age for them. It's the boomers' last gasp. And so our politicians have failed tremendously so in either not addressing actual key demographics that are going to be massive voter blocks like white men in America, but especially just not even addressing the young generations in general, which would include men of all colors and all races, of course. We're not discussed. We're like an afterthought. Big strategical error on the Republican Party's part. Now, I want to go on again. I've got maybe, how many more clips now? I've got like 3 more clips that I wanted to play, and then we'll wrap this segment up. Nick counters Crowder's warning here. Yeah, that's where we left off here. Nick counters Crowder's warning here with another solid point. I'm going to play that for you right now.
Well, here's what I would say to that. I think that every election, the Republican side basically overstates what the Republicans are doing for us. And then I think they exacerbate or overstate the risk of Democrats. This whole, they're going to pack the courts and make Puerto Rico aid. It's like, well, they didn't do that under Biden. I don't think they're going to do that this time. And if you believe that they did, why are we using the nuclear option? If you really thought Democrats were going to break precedent, pack the courts, make Puerto Rico a state, do this and that, okay, then it's life or death. We have to do everything possible. Then use the nuclear option, okay, and pass the SAVE Act so that, we could get all these Democrats off the voter rolls and so that we could break the logjam on DHS and get them their money and do the deportations. But it's like, Republicans will act like it's life or death, most important election, but then when it comes to nuclear option, they go, oh, we can't do that. Oh, well, we can't do the deportation. Oh, well, this is the best we could do. And it's like, okay, so somebody's not telling the truth here. And I don't think it's you, but I think it's
I agree with you.
So first and foremost, I will say that's like the first major statement Nick's made where I consider it to be pretty naive, and I definitely disagree with. Nick, I don't get to listen to him at length. I'm far too busy to do that. I don't get to listen to too many shows at length other than my own at this point. But it's actually been a quite an impressive little show here with Nick, and it really does reveal to me that he's capable of pretty deep thinking and good strategy, in my opinion. However, completely wrong. The Democrats will absolutely enact their insidious plan to essentially make Puerto Rico another state, and Washington, D.C. on top of it, they actually want to add as another state, both of which would be completely Democrat and would give them a massive advantage in future elections. They're very open about this, and on a microcosmic level, at a smaller level, we're seeing that in Virginia play out right now. I just covered that literally last night, actually, when it came to Abigail Spanberger and how disappointed she is in her own state that she couldn't egregiously gerrymander Virginia and turn it from a state that has 11 districts, 6 Democrat ones and 5 Republican ones, where 48% of the state votes Republican, so it's an even split. She wanted to gerrymander it to a 10-1 Democrat advantage. The state Supreme Court of Virginia, they halted that. She got her proposition voted on and passed by Virginians in a narrow 52 to 48% vote of yes. She got it passed, and the state Supreme Court of Virginia stepped in and said, that's not correct, that's not allowed, that's going to change, we're ending that right now. And what's their response to this? What are the Democrats' response to this? They're now trying to push forward. They're trying to push forward now a rule that would essentially impose an age restriction, a mandatory age retirement of 54 years old for all Virginian state Supreme Court justices. And the story there, every current Virginia State Supreme Court justice is well over the age of 54. So if they get this changed, they're essentially wiping out the entire Virginia State Supreme Court, at which point they'll be able to appoint 7 Democrat justices on there and change the Supreme Court. They're also, in addition to that, talking about packing that court with 3 additional Democrat justices for now what would be, 10 total or 11 or whatever it would be. I think they need an odd number, so it would be 2 then. So they want to pack the courts too, and they're talking about it openly at a smaller level in Virginia. They've also hinted at doing this when they obtain power at the federal level in our federal government. They're not shy about this strategy. James Carville, who's been one of the key strategists for the Clinton administration back in the day, has also openly stated about how the Democrats, there's a plan within the Democrat administration to bring in Puerto Rico as the 51st state, and then to go even further and push for Washington, D.C. to be separated out and become the 52nd state. Again, both of those would be Democrat with instantly more Democrat representation. When you combine that with open borders and mass immigration into this country, where it's the liberals who give them all the free stuff that we American native Goy taxpayers basically fund, and then incentivizes these illegal immigrants to vote in our elections Democrat. And yes, some illegals do vote, not to mention the Democrats fast track their citizenship status so that they vote, and it's a slow process, but it works over time and gradually builds. Well, the Democrats will have control forever. This is a real threat, and it is a reality we're staring down the barrel of. Now, Nick quickly counters that, appropriately so, though. I do believe it was naive for him to say that the Republicans are fear-mongering too much when it comes to what Democrats will do. But he does quickly counter it with a good point by saying, if that's true, which I do believe it is, and we're seeing evidence of that being true right now, then why not nuke the filibuster now? It's life or death right now. And again, that's the notion that young men can get behind and that I fully support. Yes, that's how our politics should be currently being handled right now by all of the people that we put into power. This is what we expected to happen. We expected a no-nonsense GOP that we voted for to take power and to move at record rates to fix this country, which is on the verge of a permanent decline. It's on the verge of permanent collapse. And the Republicans instead, because of pussies like John Thune, will not nuke the filibuster, and they will allow the minority Democrat Party led by Chuck fucking Schumer and spoken of by Timu idiot Hakeem Jeffries. They're holding all of this up, and the Republicans are saying, perfect, my favorite position to be in, the bottom, with my hands behind my back, being utterly used and cucked. I love it. I love this as a Republican. That's what John Thune likes. And it's such a disappointment and betrayal that young people are just done with it. Now, finally, I wanted to get to the last couple of clips here. So, Stephen Crowder responds to this by basically saying, well, where do we go from here then? And he poses the question here. So we'll take a listen to that.
When we know that the Democrats will obviously, and this is their plan. They didn't say they were going to make Puerto Rico a state and pack the court to 13 last time. They're saying that now. What they did say is that they were going to go a different direction in immigration, and we got, by our agreement, 10 to 20 million in 3.5 years. That is unsurvivable, and you're recommending that people take that risk based on then what else? Where do we go? So we vote Democrat, we take the risk, but we cut it off at the pass. And?
But again, it's like, you can say, well, that's not survivable. What we got. We got 10 to 20 million illegals. Why? Because Republicans didn't build the wall, and now they're not going out because Republicans won't deport them. So it's like, if Democrats get in, they're going to end the world. That's why we need Republicans to not do anything.
No, you're taking what Democrats did and blaming all Republicans. Most Republicans wanted the wall. We voted, we can't because there's something known as gridlock. And they're saying vote for the Democrats who blocked the wall and open the border.
But in 17, we had the House, the Senate, the White House, the Supreme Court. Why did they use a nuclear option to just build the wall? It's because the Republicans don't really want to build a wall. They want the illegals to come here. And then when the Democrats get in, they can say, oh, shucks, the Democrats brought in all these illegals.
It's so true.
So we're going to deport them. Get us elected.
Not only is that true, but a point that they don't acknowledge here is the issue of the fact that both sides actually inadvertently assist each other with this agenda that is mass immigration. And another way that this works is essentially the Republicans get in and they're lobbied by the Israel lobby, foreign governments, big donor money of various different sorts to go to war. They're lobbied to become neocons. We saw this with Trump, unfortunately, this term. Here we are back in the Middle East, a stupid fucking war. Well, what's happening there? We're destroying the Middle East, destroying it. And if this war resumes and keeps going, the global economy is fucked. Famines will spread. Massive amounts of people will start to starve. The countries are war-torn. The people are being displaced. And this will go on, and for however long. Hopefully it ends this week. But it will go on for however long it does, and permanent damage will be sustained. This war is unpopular, which means that there's a higher chance and likelihood of Democrats winning in 2026 and then in 2028. When they win in 2028, they take control of the executive branch, God forbid, but, let's assume that happens at this point and assume the worst. What does a Democrat president do? They look into the region where the neocon predecessor was waging war, and they say, those poor people in that war-torn country, we need to allow them into America to seek asylum. And so now we usher in even more. And these asylum seekers are never just a blend of the poor, displaced, innocent citizens. There's always a bunch of what would be future sleeper cells that sneak on board. Enemy jihadists, radicalized Muslim infidels, etc. And then they come here in addition to that because the Democrat says that we must give them asylum to atone for the sins of the neocon predecessor. And then what do the Democrats push for? Well, they push for temporary protection in the form of asylum, but then eventually down the line, they then push for amnesty. They can stay here. They can't go back. Their country's annihilated. That disgusting neocon before me destroyed it. We got to give them amnesty. Now they've been here for 2 or 3 years, and they're just so well acclimated, don't you see? We gave them all of the government entitlements, and they've built a little life for themselves because of the tax cattle that live here, me. Because of people that look like me and you and chat. You now funded this entire life that they've been able to build up here. They're living in their Section 8 housing that's funded by the state, which is your money. They're now receiving food stamps to be able to eat, which is funded by the state, which is your money. They've already had 3 or 4 children because they breed like Catholic rabbits despite being Muslim. And so now it would be such a shame. These children that they've had are growing up in America. You want us to send them back home? No, we got to give them amnesty. All 400,000 of them. So it just gets worse. And that this is how it feeds off of each other, by the way. And we're seeing this play out under this Trump administration now. There's been a push for amnesty for Haitians. This is happening right now with a red Congress. Can't emphasize that enough. Beyond that, I'm going to keep playing a little bit more.
Never mind. We only want to deport the violent criminals. Net negative migration is good enough. And it's like, that's the risk. The risk is that we play this game forever. I want to step outside of it, break the matrix. We got to run the Trump playbook from 16, get somebody fresh in. To me, that's the risk.
And I agree, actually. I do agree. Again, I don't know if I fully am on board with the strategy of intentionally voting Democrat, though I fully understand the strategy and I can see the brilliance behind it potentially. The pitfalls are definitely there. The risk is definitely there. No risk, no reward. But the other risk, I think, is appropriately stated by Nick Fuentes when he says that repeating this same cycle, this same tedious cycle of the same old Republican who disappoints and doesn't get enough done and just barely crosses the finish line for us, and actually really doesn't even do that if you really think about it, does just enough to show effort, like, oh, I'm working towards those promises I made you, but never ultimately winds up fulfilling them. Are you not tired of that as a conservative voter? Like, in all honesty, are you not tired of that? Are you just content to continue to cuck yourself like a little pussy bitch and vote for somebody who is not going to live up to their campaign promises and who will not deliver the best for you? And all in the name of what? Marginally living in a marginally better country than it would be under Democrat rule? Like, the arguments are being defeated in real time. These are the arguments. Well, at least he's not Kamala Harris, they say. Well, one has to wonder at this point, what would Kamala Harris be like? Because we were told to vote for Kamala is to vote for war with Iran. That was actually something that was said several times over again. Actually, what's his name? His deputy chief of staff, Steve, the bald guy. I can't remember his name now. Shit. He said that. He literally said to vote for Kamala is to vote for a war in the Middle East with Iran. Here we are. Stephen Miller. Thank you, Lucario. I appreciate you. Yeah, Stephen Miller. He said that. So what would it be like under Kamala? Well, probably it would be worse in some ways, but how much worse? And is it really even worth voting Republican to achieve the difference of the least worst option? Really think about that as an American. You should be voting with pride for a candidate who you believe is not going to be the least worst option. Like, that's your stand. Do you not have standards as a voter? Do you not have standards? Like, oh, I'm voting because the Republican is the least worst option. That's your standard? I guess you'll just accept anything, and that's probably true. If I could see your inside life, I'm sure you live in squalor with your fat 300-pound fucking wife who cheats on you still somehow. Like, maybe that's your standard, but some of us actually have actual standards. We actually demand the best. And that's what you're supposed to demand when it comes to elections in America. That's what it's all about. It's not about voting for the guy who won't destroy things as fast. It's not about voting for the guy who will be the least worst option. You're supposed to be voting for the guy who's actually the full-on best option, who will deliver with his heart and soul on all of the promises he makes to put you, the American, first. And so repeating the same cycle is just not going to fly with young people. My patience for that system has run out officially as of this year, officially at the start of the Iran war. And that's really where I'm at, and more people are rising up like that. This audience here is big at times. Of course, today it's not big. Nick Fuentes in the title probably didn't help in the YouTube algorithm. Talking about this probably didn't help in the YouTube algorithm because I've been so critical of Trump with this Iran war. I think I've attracted a bit of a Democrat audience. But I really don't want inferior Democrats in my chat if they're not on board with changing America. So they can all go fuck themselves. And in addition to that, a lot of MAGA chuds, they seem to think I have TDS and that I'm a Democrat when I'm not. So most of my audience, in a tragically ironic way, that's very funny to me actually, is very confused about what I am. The real issue here for me is I am so socially and fiscally conservative. I am so far right that I view Trump as a Democrat president. I view him as a 1990s New York-style Democrat, and it's completely unacceptable to me because I actually have standards for what a Republican should be. I actually expected conservatives to conserve shit. And at this point, it's very clear they're not conserving anything. They still aren't conserving anything. It's all going away. It's all been undone, and it's all been ruined, which is really why the truth of the matter is we need a different party and not a third party, because a third party is cancer to our two-party system. It will never work. Our system's not set up for that. It's never going to work. And the more parties you introduce, the worse it gets, really. The more unhappy everyone is. You look at Canada with their 5 fucking parties, and they host a re-election every 2 years because nobody's ever happy. Or it's every 18 months, I think, even. It's even faster if I remember Canadian politics right. And that's because why? Well, 21% of the population can wind up choosing the leader. That's a disaster. It's a recipe for disaster. So we need a separate party to rise up and fill the shoes of the GOP. We need to annihilate this GOP and replace it with something better. And it needs to happen fast. This is the reality of where we're at. It needs to happen fast. So start fucking praying for a miracle or get ready to fucking suffer, and then ideally suffer so much that you become the change that needs to happen, because that's where we're at. That's the crossroads here. And it needs to be at this point, a separatist and restorationist type party. We have to separate from this bullshit, but do it under the name of conservatism. And then from within that conservative party, it has to be like a hostile takeover. And as the separatists, we have to breach that. We have to regain control of this country. We have to find the candidates that can do this. More importantly, is how I should be leading this off. Vote for them, and then they have to get in and restore America. It's beyond conserving. There is nothing left to conserve. You either progress down the road of liberal extremist progressivism, or you seize control of the GOP and drastically force it to begin representing the will of the American people when it comes to actual conservative voters. Because right now it doesn't. It just represents foreign interests and big money donors. And that's the truth. This is where we're at. Like it or not, this is where we're at. You were born during such times, and you're put here to do something about it. That's what's going on right here. So I'll leave it off there. I had like 2 more clips I was going to play, actually, because Steven Crowder goes on to actually give some better arguments actually down the line here, which I found fascinating. But I've played enough of it. It's been 2 hours now. I don't like to really go live longer than that. You should go check out the stream for yourself. Here's a link to it. It was very interesting watch this morning. Yeah, let me share it in chat right now. There's a link to Steven Crowder's video right there with Nick Fuentes. So go check that out. Be sure to like the show if you haven't already. And of course, subscribe to American Advocates for more content like this. I was going to cover the Iran war, and I was going to cover, Pete Hegseth and what I have prediction-wise for him. But I'm going to save that for tomorrow, because nothing's going to happen before Trump meets with Xi Jinping in Beijing, which I predicted yesterday. So I'll cover that tomorrow, in all honesty. There's really not too much to discuss right now. Tensions are still high. Economy is still getting worse. A CIA report has come out that has given even more bad news to the Trump administration when it comes to the topic of Iran. But we'll get into that tomorrow. I'll save these tabs that I have pulled up where I was going to go over that. I was also going to play a clip of President Donald Trump to coincide with Nick Fuentes' interview and how the Republicans don't represent us. Essentially, President Donald Trump said today, I'll just spoil it. He was asked by a reporter, what extent are Americans' financial situation motivating you to make a deal in Iran? And Trump said, not even a little bit. I don't think about Americans' financial situation. So again, chop your balls off, become the cuck that you were born to be, you disgusting pussy, and continue to vote Republican in the midterms if you like that kind of an answer. Otherwise, start thinking about what really needs to be done here. Possibly running for in your own congressional district, or starting off as some sort of town councilman, school board member, a mayor of some sort, building a political career, or finding politicians or potential politicians in your area and supporting them, going door to door for signatures, supporting them financially, etc. These are the changes that actually have to take place if you're not happy with that kind of a response from our own president, when he literally acknowledges that he's not thinking about our financial situation whatsoever. It's all about winning in Iran. Iran can't have a nuke. Israel demanded we do this war, and Israel is infinitely more important than us. That's really where we're at right here. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate all of you guys. Like I said, be sure to subscribe right now to American Advocates. I go live every single night, Monday through Friday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. Tomorrow, we'll discuss everything Iran. It will be a major update on the Iran war. And if we get any news about Trump's meeting in Beijing with Xi Jinping, then perhaps I'll even go over that as well. So that's where we're at here. Howard Clegg says, yes, think locally and act locally. Amen. You know, these presidents we can vote in, and they do change the nation on a wider spectrum. But if you really want to see the changes in your own community that actually affect you the most, town council, mayor, town supervisor, school board, these are actually the areas that matter. And they're like the actual core foundation of America at the local level. And they're great entry points for a lot of people to begin building a political career. So, you know, that's what I always advocate for. We need good people to run in our political system. If you're a conservative Christian, especially, or you have some sort of, you know, value to you that you hold true and dear to your heart, and you believe in putting Americans first, that's the people that we need. If you believe in running a grassroots campaign and turning down APAC money and turning down big donor money, no big pharma, no big agriculture, no APAC, no foreign government money, you know, no billionaire money, you just want grassroots, then you're the type of person that should probably be running. And this country sucks because we don't have enough of that. So that's where I'm at on that. Glory to America. No matter how bad it is, I love this country. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. God bless the USA, and God bless all the smart people in chat, which is probably like 5 of you. The rest of you are probably fucking pathetic and stupid. But God bless everyone. Have a great rest of your evening. I'll be back here live tomorrow. Take